In the shadowy halls of Blackwood Hall, Hercule Poirot faces his wildest case yet. Lord Grayson, presumed missing, is alive, orchestrating a chilling game to unmask a killer. Cryptic clues, a painted scarf, a hidden locket, a blood-red rose, lead Poirot through a maze of deception where every guest hides a deadly secret. Will his craziest theory crack the truth, or is the real murderer one step ahead? The clock ticks in this gripping mystery. Chapter 1. The Mysterious Invitation. The rain tapped gently on the window of Hercule Poirot's cozy London apartment. It was a gray, chilly afternoon in late autumn, the kind that made you want to stay inside with a warm drink. Poirot sat in, his favorite armchair, a soft red one with a high back, sipping tea from a delicate cup. His small, neat mustache twitched as he read a newspaper, but his sharp eyes weren't focused on the words. He was thinking, as he often did, about puzzles of the mind, the kind that hid secrets in plain sight. Poirot was no ordinary man. He was a detective, famous for solving mysteries that left others scratching their heads. His brain worked like a clever clock, ticking away, noticing every tiny detail others missed. A crooked tie, a nervous laugh, a word said too quickly. These were the clues that spoke to Poirot. And today his clock was ticking louder than usual. The doorbell rang, a sharp ding that cut through the quiet. Poirot set down his cup, adjusted his perfectly pressed suit, and walked to the door. His steps were quick but careful, like a cat moving through a room full of delicate glass. He opened the door to find nobody there, just a small cream-colored envelope lying on the mat. It was addressed to Monsieur Hercule Poirot, in a neat, slanted handwriting that looked both elegant and rushed. "Curious," Poirot murmured, picking up the envelope. He turned it over, checking for a return address, but there was none. His fingers, small and precise, opened the envelope with care, as if it might hold a secret too fragile to break. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded once with words, written in the same neat hand. "Dear Monsieur Poirot," the letter began, "your reputation as a man of unmatched cleverness precedes you. I am in need of such a mind. A matter of great importance awaits at Blackwood Hall, a place where shadows hide truths too strange for most to believe. Come tomorrow evening if you dare, and uncover what no one else can. The train leaves at 6. Tell no one. Yours, a friend." Poirot's eyebrows lifted, just a fraction. A friend? He had no friends who wrote letters like this, full of mystery and no name. The words danced in his head, each one a clue. "Shadows hide truths," he repeated, softly, his Belgian accent curling around the words. Too strange for most to believe. This was no ordinary invitation. It was a challenge, a puzzle wrapped in paper daring him to solve it. He walked back to his armchair, the letter still in his hand. The rain outside grew heavier, drumming on the window like fingers tapping out a code. Poirot sat, crossed his legs, and read the letter again. Blackwood Hall. He knew of it vaguely, a big old house in the countryside far from London's noise. It belonged to Lord Grayson, a rich man who kept to himself, rarely seen in the city. Why would such a man, or someone claiming to be his friend, need Poirot? The clock on the mantel ticked, marking the seconds. Poirot's mind raced, but his face stayed calm, almost still. He didn't trust easily, not after years of solving crimes where smiles hid lies. This letter could be a trap, a trick to lure him somewhere dangerous. But traps were just puzzles with sharper edges, and Poirot loved puzzles. Besides, the letter's tone wasn't threatening. It was pleading, almost, as if the writer truly needed help. He stood and walked to his desk, a polished wooden thing, with papers stacked neatly in one corner. He pulled out a map of England, spreading it across the desk like a tablecloth. His finger traced the train lines from London to the countryside, stopping at a small dot labeled Blackwood Village. The hall wasn't far from there, maybe an hour's walk or a short ride. The train at 6 tomorrow would get him there, by nightfall. Poirot folded the map and tucked the letter inside his jacket pocket. He didn't need to read it again. Every word was already carved into his memory. He glanced at the clock, 4 in the afternoon. There was time to pack, to prepare, to think. But first he needed to know more about Lord Grayson. He moved to his bookshelf, a tall, orderly row of volumes that smelled faintly of leather and dust. Poirot's fingers danced across the spines until he found a thick book titled Who's Who in England. He flipped through the pages, his eyes scanning for Grayson. There it was. Lord Edmund Grayson, age 52, inherited Blackwood Hall from his father, a man of wealth but little fame. The entry was short, mentioning only his business in shipping and a quiet life away from society. No mention of scandals, no hint of enemies. Too clean, Poirot thought. A man with no enemies in a book like this often had the most dangerous ones. He closed the book and paced the room, his shiny black shoes clicking on the wooden floor. The letter's words echoed in his mind. Shadows hide truths. What truth? A crime? A secret? And why him? Hercule Poirot, a detective who thrived on facts, not shadows. He stopped pacing and looked out the window. The rain had slowed, leaving streaks on the glass like tears. He smiled faintly. A puzzle was calling, and Poirot never ignored a call like that. By evening, he had packed a small suitcase, 2 suits, a spare tie, his favorite comb for his mustache, and a notebook for jotting down clues. He didn't need much. His greatest tool was his mind. He sat at his desk again, writing a short note to his friend, Captain Hastings, who was away visiting family. My dear Hastings, he wrote, I am off on a little adventure. Should you not hear from me in a week, come to Blackwood Hall. But do not worry, mon ami. Poirot is always prepared. He sealed the note and left it on the desk just in case. The next morning, Poirot woke early. The rain had stopped and a pale sun peeked through the clouds. He dressed carefully, choosing a dark gray suit and a crisp white shirt. His mustache, as always, was perfect, each hair in place like soldiers in a line. He checked his pocket watch. 5 o'clock. Plenty of time to catch the 6 o'clock train. He ate a simple breakfast of toast and tea, his mind already at Blackwood Hall, imagining the people he might meet, the secrets they might hide. At the train station, London buzzed around him. Men in hats rushed by, women carried shopping bags, and children darted through the crowd laughing. Poirot stood apart, calm and watchful, his small frame somehow commanding attention. He bought a ticket to Blackwood Village and boarded the train, choosing a quiet compartment near the back. The seats were worn but comfortable, smelling faintly of smoke and leather. He settled in, the letter still in his pocket, and watched the city fade into fields as the train chugged forward. The journey was long, nearly 3 hours, but Poirot didn't mind. He liked trains. They gave him time to think. He pulled out the letter again, not to read it, but to study the paper itself. It was thick, expensive, the kind used by someone with money. The ink was black, the writing steady but with a slight tremble, as if the writer had been nervous or excited. Poirot held the paper to the light, checking for a watermark. There it was, faint but clear, a crest with a lion and a rose. He didn't recognize it, but he would remember it. As the train neared Blackwood Village, the landscape changed. The fields gave way to dense woods, and the air through the open window smelled of pine and damp earth. The station was small, little more than a platform with a wooden bench and a sign that read Blackwood Village. Poirot stepped off the train, his suitcase in one hand, his cane in the other. The platform was empty except for a young man, in a driver's cap leaning against a black car. Monsieur Poirot? The driver asked, his voice rough but polite. Oui, that is I, Poirot said, nodding. I'm to take you to Blackwood Hall, the driver said, opening the car door. He was young, maybe 20, with a nervous twitch in his cheek. Poirot noticed it immediately. Nervousness was a clue, always. The drive to Blackwood Hall was short but winding, through narrow roads lined with tall trees. The hall itself appeared suddenly, a massive stone building with ivy crawling up its walls. It looked old, almost haunted, with tall windows that glinted in the fading light. Poirot felt a shiver, not of fear but of excitement. This was a place where secrets lived. The driver stopped at the front steps and Poirot stepped out, his shoes crunching on the gravel. The door of the hall opened before he could knock, revealing a butler, tall and thin, with a face as blank as a sheet of paper. "Welcome, Monsieur Poirot," the butler said, his voice smooth. "The other guests are waiting." "Guests?" Poirot asked, raising an eyebrow. The letter hadn't mentioned others. "Yes, sir," the butler said, leading him inside. "Lord Grayson has invited several people. You are the last to arrive." Poirot stepped into a grand hallway, its walls lined with paintings of stern-looking men and women. A chandelier hung above, its crystals catching the light like tiny stars. The air smelled of wax and old wood. He heard voices, low and tense, coming from a room to the right. The butler led him toward it, and Poirot's heart beat a little faster. The puzzle was about to begin. The room was a large parlor with heavy curtains and a roaring fire in the hearth. 5 people sat around a table, their faces a mix of curiosity and unease. Poirot took them in quickly. A woman in a green dress, her hair piled high, who looked rich and proud. A man in a military jacket, his face red from too much sun or drink. A younger man with glasses fidgeting with a pen. A quiet woman in plain clothes, her eyes darting nervously. And an older man with a beard staring into the fire as if it held answers. "May I present Monsieur Hercule Poirot," the butler said, then left the room. The woman in the green dress stood. "I'm Lady Margaret Hale," she said, her voice sharp. "And who exactly are you?" Chapter 2. Arrival at Blackwood Hall. The heavy wooden door of Blackwood Hall creaked as it closed behind Hercule Poirot, shutting out the chilly evening air. The grand hallway stretched before him, its high ceiling lost in shadows. The butler, tall and thin as a lamppost, led the way with a slow, measured step. Poirot's sharp eyes darted around, taking in every detail. The faded red carpet under his feet, the old paintings on the walls showing stern faces in stiff collars, and the chandelier above, its crystals glinting like eyes watching him. The air smelled of wax and something musty, like a house that held too many secrets. Poirot's small polished shoes clicked on the floor as he followed the butler. His suitcase felt light in his hand, but his mind was heavy with questions. The letter, tucked safely in his jacket pocket, had promised a mystery at Blackwood Hall. Now, standing in this grand, eerie place, he felt the puzzle starting to take shape. The voices he'd heard from the parlor grew louder, a mix of sharp tones and nervous murmurs. Poirot's mustache twitched. People, he knew, were the heart of any mystery, and these voices were already telling him something. The butler stopped at a wide doorway and turned. "The parlor, Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice flat as a board. "The other guests are inside. Lord Grayson will join you shortly." "Lord Grayson?" Poirot asked, tilting his head. "He is here, then?" The butler's face didn't change. "He is expected, sir." Without another word, he turned and disappeared down a side hall, his footsteps fading into the quiet. Poirot adjusted his tie, a habit when his mind was working fast. Expected, but not here. Curious. He stepped into the parlor and the voices stopped, like someone had flipped a switch. 5 pairs of eyes turned to him, each face a different kind of puzzle. The room was warm, with a fire crackling in a massive, stone fireplace. Heavy curtains blocked the windows, making the space feel smaller, almost suffocating. A long table stood in the center, covered with a white cloth and set with glasses and a decanter of dark red wine. The woman in the green dress, who had introduced herself as Lady Margaret Hale, stood up. Her hair was piled high like a crown, and her eyes were sharp like she was sizing Poirot up for a fight. "So you're the detective," she said, her voice cutting through the silence. "I hope you're as clever as they say, because this is a waste of my time." Poirot smiled, a small polite curve of his lips. "Madame Hercule Poirot is never a waste of time. I am here to find the truth, and I suspect it is closer than you think." Lady Margaret snorted, crossing her arms. "Truth? This whole thing is nonsense. Dragged to this dreary house for some rich man's game. Poirot's eyes moved to the others, cataloging them like pieces on a chessboard. The man in the military jacket, red-faced and broad-shouldered, was Colonel Reginald Blake. He sat stiffly, his hands gripping a glass of wine as if it were a weapon. Next to him was a younger man, thin and pale, with glasses that kept slipping down his nose. He was Dr. Simon Wells, fidgeting with a pen, his eyes darting to the door every few seconds. Across the table sat a quiet woman in a plain gray dress, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She was Miss Clara Finch, the governess, her face pale and her eyes wide, like a rabbit caught in a trap. The last was an older man with a gray beard, Mr. Harold Vance, who stared into the fire, his fingers tapping the arm of his chair. "May I ask," Poirot said, his voice soft but clear, "why you are all here?" The room stayed quiet for a moment, the only sound the pop of a log in the fire. Then Colonel Blake spoke, his voice loud and rough. "Same as you, I suppose. Got a letter. Said to come to Blackwood Hall. Something about a matter of importance. Signed a friend. Load of rubbish, if you ask me." "Rubbish or not," Dr. Wells said, pushing his glasses up. "We're here. And where's Lord Grayson? He's the one who invited us, isn't he?" Miss Finch's hands tightened in her lap. I don't know," she whispered. "The letter didn't say much. Just that I had to come." Mr. Vance turned from the fire, his eyes narrow. "It's a game," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "Grayson's always been one for games, likes to play with people's heads." Poirot nodded, storing every word in his mind. 5 letters, all vague, all signed, a friend. Just like his. He stepped closer to the table, his cane tapping lightly on the floor. "And none of you know why Lord Grayson wishes us here?" Lady Margaret laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "If I knew, I wouldn't be sitting in this dusty old room waiting for a man who can't even bother to show up." The butler reappeared, carrying a silver tray with a folded note. "For you, Monsieur Poirot," he said, handing it over before vanishing again. Poirot opened the note, his fingers steady. The same neat handwriting as before, the same thick paper. "Monsieur Poirot," it read, "the truth you seek is in this house, but it is not what it seems. Look to the shadows. Trust no one. The game begins now." He folded the note and slipped it into his pocket, his face calm but his mind racing. The others watched him, waiting for him to speak. "It seems," he said, "that Lord Grayson has a purpose for us, a puzzle perhaps, and I, Hercule Poirot, am very good at puzzles." Colonel Blake slammed his glass on the table. "Enough of this nonsense. Where's Grayson? I didn't come here to play games." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his eyes twinkling. "That is exactly why you are here." Before anyone could respond, a loud crash echoed from somewhere in the house. Miss Finch gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Dr. Wells stood, his chair scraping. The floor. "What was that?" he demanded. Poirot held up a hand, silencing them. "Calm, mes amis. A noise is just a noise until we know its meaning." But his heart beat faster. A crash in a house like this was never just a noise. The butler returned, his face still blank but his eyes flickering with something. Worry, maybe. "A vase fell in the library," he said. "Nothing to concern you." Poirot's mustache twitched. A vase falling on its own? Unlikely. He made a mental note to visit the library later. "Very well," he said. "Shall we dine? A good meal, it clears the mind." The butler led them to a dining room even grander than the parlor. A long table was set with silver and crystal, the kind of table that screamed money. The guests sat still tense, their eyes flicking to Poirot as if he might pull a rabbit from his hat. The food was simple but good, roast chicken, potatoes, and green beans, but the mood was anything but warm. Every clink of a fork felt loud, every glance heavy with suspicion. Poirot ate slowly, watching. Lady Margaret picked at her food, her lips tight. Colonel Blake ate like a man at war, fast and loud. Dr. Wells kept adjusting his glasses, his hands shaking slightly. Miss Finch barely touched her plate, her eyes fixed on the tablecloth. Mr. Vance ate steadily, but his eyes kept moving to the door, as if expecting someone, or something. "Tell me," Poirot said, breaking the silence. "Do any of you know Lord Grayson well?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Lady Margaret spoke first. "I met him once, years ago. A dull man, obsessed with his ships and his money." "He's no friend of mine," Colonel Blake grunted. "Knew him in passing, business mostly. Owed me a favor, which is probably why I'm here." Dr. Wells shrugged. "I don't know him. My letter said something about a medical matter. I'm a doctor, so I thought, maybe he's ill." Miss Finch's voice was barely a whisper. "I worked for his cousin long ago, that's all." Mr. Vance leaned back, his beard hiding his expression. "Grayson and I go back. Old business partners. Not always friendly ones." Poirot nodded, his mind sorting their words like cards. Each answer was a clue, each pause a hint. They all had connections to Grayson, however thin, and none of them seemed happy to be here. After dinner, the butler led them back to the parlor. The fire was lower now, casting long shadows across the room. Poirot noticed a painting above the fireplace, a portrait of a man with sharp eyes and a thin smile. Lord Grayson, he guessed. The eyes seemed to follow him, like they knew something he didn't. "Perhaps," Poirot said, turning to the group, "we should explore this house. If Lord Grayson is not here to greet us, we must find our own answers." Lady Margaret rolled her eyes. "What, wander around like children playing hide and seek?" "Exactly, madam," Poirot said, his voice smooth. "Sometimes the best way to find is to seek." The group agreed, some reluctantly, and they split up to explore. Poirot chose the library, where the vase had fallen. The room was huge, with shelves reaching the ceiling, stuffed with books that looked untouched for years. A broken vase lay in a corner, its pieces scattered across the rug. Poirot knelt, examining the shards. They were sharp, fresh, as if the face had been smashed on purpose. Near it he found a small key, half hidden under the rug. He picked it up, turning it in his fingers. It was old, tarnished, but it felt important. He slipped the key into his pocket and stood, his eyes scanning the shelves. One book caught his attention, a thick volume with a leather cover slightly out of place. He pulled it out and opened it. It wasn't a book at all, but a box, hollow inside, with a single piece of paper. The same handwriting as the letter. "The truth is in the shadows," it read. "Look where the light does not reach." Poirot's heart quickened. Another clue, another piece of the puzzle. He tucked the paper away and left the library, his mind buzzing. The house was alive with secrets, and he was just beginning to hear its whispers. As he returned to the parlor, the others were waiting, their faces a mix of boredom and unease. "Find anything?" Colonel Blake asked, his tone gruff. "Perhaps." Chapter 3. The vanishing host. The fire in the parlor of Blackwood Hall crackled softly, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Hercule Poirot stood near the fireplace, his small, neat figure outlined by the glow. His sharp eyes moved from one guest to another, watching their faces as they settled back into the room after exploring the house. The air was thick with tension, like a storm waiting to break. The guests, Lady Margaret Hale, Colonel Reginald Blake, Dr. Simon Wells, Miss Clara Finch, and Mr. Harold Vance, sat or stood, their unease as clear as the ticking of the clock on the mantel. Poirot's fingers brushed the small key in his pocket, the one he'd found in the library beside the broken vase. The note he'd discovered with its cryptic words, "The truth is in the shadows. Look where the light does not reach," sat heavy in his mind. He hadn't shared either find with the others, not yet. Trust, as the letter had warned, was not something to give lightly in this house. Lady Margaret, in her green dress, paced near the window, her heels clicking on the wooden floor. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, her voice sharp as a knife. "We've been here for hours and still no sign of Lord Grayson. Is he playing some kind of joke? Colonel Blake, slouched in a chair with a fresh glass of wine, grunted. If he is, it's a blasted poor one, dragging us out to this gloomy pile of stones for nothing. Dr. Wells pushed his glasses up his nose, his hands shaky. Maybe he's ill, he said, his voice thin. My letter mentioned a medical matter. Perhaps he's indisposed. Miss Finch, sitting quietly in a corner, clutched her hands together. I don't like this, she whispered, her eyes wide. It feels wrong, like something bad is coming. Mr. Vance, still staring into the fire, spoke without turning. Grayson's no fool. If he's not here, it's because he wants it that way. Mark my words, he's watching us. Poirot's mustache twitched. Watching. An interesting thought. He filed it away, his mind already turning over the pieces of this puzzle. The letters, the broken vase, the key, the note, all pointed to a game. But what kind? And why? Before he could speak, the butler reappeared, his face as blank as ever. He carried a silver tray, but this time it held a single folded paper. A message, he said, his voice flat. Found on Lord Grayson's desk. Poirot took the paper, his fingers careful, as if it might vanish. The others leaned forward, their eyes locked on him. He unfolded it slowly, reading the words aloud in his clear, accented voice. To my guests, if you read this, I am gone. The truth lies with you, but one among you hides a deadly secret. Find it, or it will find you. Grayson. The room went still, the only sound the crackle of the fire. Miss Finch gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Dr. Wells's glasses slipped down his nose again. Colonel Blake's face turned redder, his fist tightening around his glass. Lady Margaret stopped pacing, her lips pressed into a thin line. Mr. Vance's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. Gone? Lady Margaret said, her voice sharp. What does that mean? Dead? Run off? This is absurd. Dead, Colonel Blake muttered. Sounds like he's dead, and one of us did it, if this note's to be believed. Nonsense, Dr. Wells said, but his voice shook. There's no body, no proof. This is just theatrics. Miss Finch's voice was barely a whisper. A deadly secret. What does he mean? Poirot held up a hand, his calm silencing their chatter. Mes amis, let us not jump to shadows. A note is only words until we find the truth behind it. Lord Grayson says he is gone, but we have no body, no blood, no sign of struggle, except perhaps a broken vase. His eyes flicked to the butler, who stood by the door, still as a statue. Tell me, monsieur, where was this note found? The butler's eyes flickered, just for a moment. On Lord Grayson's desk in his study, sir. I checked the room after the incident in the library. And you saw no sign of Lord Grayson? Poirot asked. None, sir, the butler said. The study was empty. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. An empty study, a cryptic note, a missing host. The puzzle was growing, and he felt the thrill of it, like a hunter catching the scent of his quarry. Very well, he said. I propose we visit this study. Perhaps it holds more answers. Lady Margaret rolled her eyes. More wandering? This house is a maze, and I'm tired of games. Then stay, madame, Poirot said, his tone polite but firm. But Hercule Poirot does not sit and wait for the truth. It must be found. The others agreed, some grudgingly, and the butler led them down a long hallway. The walls were lined with more paintings, their eyes seeming to follow the group. The air grew colder as they moved deeper into the house, the light dimmer. Poirot's cane tapped the floor, a steady rhythm that kept his thoughts in order. He noticed Miss Finch walking close to Dr. Wells, her hands still clasped tightly. Colonel Blake strode ahead, his shoulders squared like he was marching to battle. Lady Margaret lagged behind, muttering about the dust. Mr. Vance stayed near. Poirot, his silence heavy with meaning. The study was at the end of the hall behind a heavy oak door. The butler pushed it open, revealing a room that smelled of leather and ink. A large desk sat in the center, covered with papers and a single lamp that cast a weak yellow glow. Bookshelves lined one wall, a window the other, its curtains drawn tight. A fireplace, cold and empty, sat opposite the desk. Poirot's eyes swept the room, noting every detail. The neat stack of papers, the ink bottle with a smudge on its rim, the chair pushed slightly askew. "This is where you found the note?" Poirot asked the butler. "Yes, sir," the butler said, pointing to the desk. "Right there in the center." Poirot approached the desk, his fingers brushing the wood. The note had been placed deliberately, meant to be found. He opened a drawer, finding only pens and blank paper. Another drawer held a small photograph, faded but clear. A young woman with a bright smile, her arm around a man who looked like a younger Lord Grayson. Poirot slipped the photo into his pocket next to the key and the note from the library. "Anything interesting?" Colonel Blake asked, peering over Poirot's shoulder. "Perhaps," Poirot said, his voice light. "A detective does not share until he is certain." Dr. Wells coughed nervously. "Shouldn't we look for Lord Grayson? If he's gone, he could be hurt, or worse." "A sensible suggestion," Poirot said. "But first, let us understand this room. It is, I think, the heart of our mystery." He moved to the fireplace, kneeling to inspect it. The ashes were cold, but a faint mark caught his eye. A smudge of soot on the hearth, shaped like a footprint. Too small to be a man's, too deliberate to be an accident. He stood, his mind turning over the clue. A footprint in a cold fireplace. Curious. Miss Finch hovered near the door, her eyes wide. "I don't like this room," she said. "It feels wrong." "Wrong how, mademoiselle?" Poirot asked, turning to her. She hesitated, her cheeks pale. "Like someone's watching us." Poirot nodded, his eyes scanning the room again. The curtains. They were heavy, floor length, perfect for hiding. He walked to the window and pulled them back, revealing only glass and the dark night beyond. But as he let the curtains fall, he noticed a faint draft cold against his hand. He pressed the wall beside the window, and to his surprise it gave a soft click. A panel slid open, revealing a narrow passage. The others gasped. "A secret passage," Dr. Wells said, his voice high. "Indeed," Poirot said, peering into the dark. The passage was narrow, barely wide enough for a man, and it smelled of damp stone. "This house, it seems, has many secrets." Colonel Blake stepped forward, his face eager. "Let's go in. Might lead to Grayson." "Not yet," Poirot said, holding up a hand. "A passage like this is dangerous without preparation. We will explore it, but with care." Lady Margaret scoffed. "You're awfully cautious for a detective. What's next, checking under the rugs?" Poirot smiled. "If necessary, madame." They returned to the desk, searching for more clues. Poirot found a ledger, its pages filled with numbers and names. Business dealings, perhaps. One name appeared often, Margaret Hale. He glanced at Lady Margaret, who was examining a bookshelf with exaggerated boredom. A connection, perhaps. He would watch her closely. As the group searched, a low moan echoed through the house, like wind, but deeper, almost human. Miss Finch whimpered, and even Colonel Blake looked uneasy. "What the devil was that?" he demanded. "The house, perhaps," Poirot said, though he didn't believe it. Or another clue. He led them back to the parlor, his mind buzzing with questions. The note, the key, the photo, the footprint, the passage. All pieces of a puzzle that pointed to Lord Grayson's disappearance. But was he truly gone, or was this, as Mr. Vance had suggested, a game? Poirot's instincts told him the truth was close, hidden in the shadows, just as the note had said. Back in the parlor, the guests sat, their faces pale in the firelight. Poirot stood, his hands clasped behind his back. "Mes amis," he said, "we have a mystery. Lord Grayson is gone, or so it seems. His note speaks of a deadly secret, and this house holds clues to it. I ask you now, what do you know of Grayson? Speak plainly, for the truth will not wait." The room was silent, each guest avoiding his eyes. Poirot's mustache twitched. Silence, too, was a clue. And Hercule Poirot was very good at reading clues. Chapter 4. The Outlandish Theory. The parlor of Blackwood Hall glowed softly in the firelight. but the warmth did little to ease the chill in the air. Hercule Poirot stood near the fireplace, his small frame casting a long shadow across the room. His sharp eyes, bright as polished coins, moved from one guest to another, reading their faces like pages in a book. Lady Margaret Hale sat stiffly, her green dress catching the light as she tapped her fingers impatiently. Colonel Reginald Blake slouched in his chair, his red face flushed from wine and irritation. Dr. Simon Wells fidgeted with his glasses, his nervous energy filling the room like static. Miss Clara Finch sat in a corner, her hands knotted in her lap, her eyes wide with fear. Mr. Harold Vance leaned back, his gray beard hiding his expression, but his fingers drummed a steady rhythm on the arm of his chair. The note from Lord Grayson's study, with its warning of a deadly secret, lay heavy on Poirot's mind. The key from the library, the cryptic note about shadows, the photograph of a young woman with Grayson, the footprint in the fireplace, the secret passage, all were pieces of a puzzle that grew more complex by the hour. And now, the moan that had echoed through the house moments ago lingered in the guest's thoughts, making the silence feel heavier. Poirot clasped his hands behind his back, his mustache twitching slightly. "Mes amis," he said, his voice clear and calm. "We are in a house of mysteries. Lord Grayson is gone, or so it seems. His note suggests danger, perhaps death. But I, Hercule Poirot, have a theory. A theory some may call outlandish." Lady Margaret snorted, crossing her arms. "Outlandish? That's putting it mildly. This whole affair is nonsense. A missing lord, secret passages, cryptic notes. It's like a bad novel." Colonel Blake leaned forward, his eyes narrow. "Let's hear it then, detective. What's this theory of yours?" Poirot smiled, a small, knowing smile. "Very well. I propose that Lord Grayson is not dead, nor has he fled. He is here in this house, alive and watching us. His disappearance is a ruse, a carefully planned game to draw out a truth. One of you hides a secret so dangerous that Grayson believes only this charade will reveal it." The room erupted in noise. Lady Margaret laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. "Alive? Watching us? That's absurd. Why would a man like Grayson play such a ridiculous trick?" Dr. Wells pushed his glasses up, his voice shaky. "It doesn't make sense. If he's alive, why the note? Why scare us like this?" Miss Finch's voice was barely a whisper. "Watching us? But where? How?" Mr. Vance's eyes gleamed in the firelight. "Clever," he said, almost to himself. "Grayson always liked his games, but this is bold even for him." Colonel Blake slammed his fist on the table, making the wine glasses rattle. "Rubbish. If he's here, let him show himself. I'm not here to be toyed with." Poirot raised a hand, his calm silencing them like a teacher quieting a noisy classroom. "Patience, mes amis. A theory is only a seed. It must be tested, watered by facts, pruned by reason. But consider this. No body, no blood, no sign of struggle. A note placed where it would be found. A house full of secrets, passages, keys, hidden messages. Does this not suggest a man who wishes to control the stage?" Lady Margaret's eyes narrowed. "You're saying he's hiding like a child playing hide-and-seek? For what purpose?" "To expose a traitor," Poirot said, his voice steady. "One among you, perhaps, has a secret tied to Grayson's past. A betrayal, a crime, a debt unpaid. He has brought you here to force the truth into the light." The guests exchanged glances, some angry, some nervous. Miss Finch's hands trembled and she looked down, avoiding Poirot's gaze. Dr. Wells coughed, his fingers fumbling with his pen. Colonel Blake's face grew redder, his jaw tight. Mr. Vance's drumming fingers stopped, his eyes locked on Poirot. Lady Margaret stood, her hands on her hips. "This is outrageous," she said. "You're accusing one of us without proof." "Not accusing, madame," Poirot said, his tone gentle but firm. "Merely suggesting. The proof, it will come. Hercule Poirot always finds the proof." The butler reappeared, his face as blank as ever, carrying a tray with tea. "Shall I serve, sir?" he asked Poirot as if the room weren't buzzing with tension. "Yes, thank you," Poirot said, his eyes never leaving the guests. The butler moved silently, pouring tea into delicate cups. Poirot watched him, noting the steady hands, the careful steps. A butler who saw everything but said nothing. Another piece of the puzzle. As the guests sipped their tea, Poirot paced slowly, his cane tapping the floor. "Let us consider," he said. "Each of you received a letter, yes? Each signed, a friend, each vague but urgent. Why you? What connects you to Lord Grayson?" Colonel Blake grunted. "I told you business. He owed me a favor. Nothing more." Dr. Wells shrugged. "Medical matter, like I said. I assumed he needed a doctor." Miss Finch's voice was soft, almost lost, in the crackle of the fire. "His cousin. I worked for her, that's all." Mr. Vance leaned forward, his beard catching the light. "Old partners, like I said. Not always on good terms." Lady Margaret's lips curled. "I barely knew the man. Met him once, years ago. This is a waste of my time." Poirot nodded, his mind sorting their words like cards in a deck. Each answer was a thread, thin but strong, leading back to Grayson. He stopped pacing and turned to the portrait above the fireplace. The man with sharp eyes and a thin smile, Lord Grayson himself. "He watches us even now," Poirot said, gesturing to the painting. "Perhaps not in body, but in spirit. This house is his, and we are his guests." Another moan echoed through the house, louder this time, like a cry, caught in the wind. Miss Finch gasped, spilling her tea. Dr. Wells stood, his chair scraping the floor. "That's not the house," he said, his voice high. "That's a person." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Perhaps," he said, "or perhaps it is another clue, meant to unsettle us." Colonel Blake stood, his fist clenched. "I've had enough of this. I'm searching this house, Grayson or no Grayson." "Non, monsieur," Poirot said, his voice sharp. "We search together, or not at all. A house like this, with its passages and shadows, is no place for reckless steps." The colonel glared but sat down, muttering under his breath. Poirot turned to the butler. "Monsieur, where did that sound come from?" The butler hesitated, just a fraction of a second. "The upper floors, perhaps, sir. The house is old. It speaks sometimes." Poirot's mustache twitched. A house that speaks. A convenient excuse. "Very well," he said. "We will investigate. But first, let us return to the study. There is more to learn there." The guests followed, their footsteps heavy with reluctance. The hallway felt colder now, the painting's eyes more piercing. Poirot led the way, his cane a steady rhythm against the floor. The study was as they'd left it, the desk still cluttered with papers, the secret passage still hidden behind the curtain. Poirot moved to the desk, his fingers brushing the ledger he'd seen earlier. The name Margaret Hale appeared again, tied to a large sum of money. He glanced at Lady Margaret, who was examining her nails with studied boredom. A clue, perhaps, but not enough. He turned to the fireplace, the smudge of soot still there, the footprint clear in his mind. "This fireplace," he said. "It has not been used in days. Yet there is a mark, a sign of someone's presence." Dr. Wells peered over his shoulder. "A footprint? In soot? That's odd." "Odd, yes," Poirot said, "but not without meaning. Someone stood here. Perhaps watching, perhaps hiding." Miss Finch shivered. "Hiding? From what?" "From us," Poirot said simply. "Or from something else." He moved to the secret passage, pulling back the curtain. The dark tunnel stretched, into nothingness, its air cold and damp. "This passage," he said, "it leads somewhere. Perhaps to Lord Grayson, perhaps to his secret." Colonel Blake pushed forward. "Then let's go in. What are we waiting for?" Poirot held up a hand. "Patience, monsieur. A passage like this is a trap as much as a path. We need light and we need care." The butler returned with a lantern, its flame casting eerie shadows. Poirot took it, his face calm but his heart racing. The passage was narrow, the walls rough stone, the air thick with dust. He stepped inside, the others following close behind. The lantern's light danced on the walls, revealing nothing but more stone and the faint outline of a door far ahead. As they walked, the moan came again, closer now, almost human. Miss Finch grabbed Dr. Wells's arm, her breath quick. "It's him," she whispered. "It's Lord Grayson." Poirot said nothing, his eyes fixed on the door. It was old, wooden, with a small lock that matched the key in his pocket. He pulled the key out, its tarnished surface glinting in the lantern light. "Let us see," he said, fitting the key into the lock. The door creaked open, revealing a small room, empty except for a single chair and a table. On the table was another note, in the same neat handwriting. Poirot read it aloud. "You are close, but not close enough. The truth is deeper, darker. Look to the past." The guests crowded around, their faces pale. "The past?" Lady Margaret said, her voice sharp. "What does that mean?" Poirot folded the note, his mind buzzing. "It means, madame, that Lord Grayson's game is about more than this house. It is about you, your secrets, your histories, and I, Hercule Poirot, will find them." Chapter 5. Whispers of the Past. The small hidden room at the end of the secret passage in Blackwood Hall felt like a trap, its stone walls closing in around Hercule Poirot and the guests. The lantern in Poirot's hand cast a flickering glow, making shadows dance like ghosts on the rough stone. The note he'd just read, "You are close, but not close enough. The truth is deeper, darker. Look to the past," lay folded in his pocket next to the key, the photograph, and the earlier cryptic message from the library. His sharp eyes scanned the room, taking in the single chair, the dusty table, and the heavy silence that pressed against them. The moan they'd heard moments ago still echoed in their minds, a sound too human to be just the wind. Poirot turned to the guests, their faces pale in the dim light. Lady Margaret Hale stood with her arms crossed, her green dress looking out of place in the grim room. Colonel Reginald Blake gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. Dr. Simon Wells adjusted his glasses, his nervous fidgeting louder, in the quiet. Miss Clara Finch stood close to the door, her hands trembling as she clutched her plain gray dress. Mr. Harold Vance leaned against the wall, his gray beard hiding his expression, but his eyes glinted with something, curiosity, perhaps, or fear. "Mes amis," Poirot said, his voice steady despite the eerie setting. "This note speaks of the past. Lord Grayson, I believe, is pointing us to something old, something hidden in your histories. We must uncover it." Lady Margaret's laugh was sharp, cutting through the silence. "The past? What nonsense. I barely knew the man. Why drag us? Into his old grudges?" Colonel Blake grunted, his red face glowing in the lantern light. "Grayson's always been a schemer, probably digging up dirt to embarrass someone." Dr. Wells pushed his glasses up, his voice shaky. "I don't understand. My letter said a medical matter. What past could I have with him?" Miss Finch's voice was a whisper, almost lost in the dark. I worked for his cousin. Years ago, that's all I know." Mr. Vance's eyes narrowed. "Grayson and I had dealings long ago. Not all of them pleasant. But this feels personal." Poirot nodded, his mustache twitching as he stored their words in his clever mind. Each guest had a thread tying them to Grayson, however thin. The photograph in his pocket of a young woman with Grayson felt heavier now. Was she the key to this past? He needed more clues, and Blackwood Hall with its secrets was ready to give them. "Let us return to the parlor," Poirot said, holding the lantern high. "This room has told us what it can. The answers lie elsewhere." The group followed him back through the narrow passage, the lantern's light bouncing off the stone walls. The air was cold, damp, and smelled of earth, like a forgotten cellar. Poirot's cane tapped the ground, a steady rhythm that kept his thoughts in order. The moan didn't come again, but its memory hung over them, making Miss Finch walk closer to Dr. Wells, her eyes darting to the shadows. Back in the parlor, the fire had died to embers, casting a faint red glow. The butler, silent as ever, stood, by the door, his blank face giving nothing away. Poirot set the lantern on the table and turned to the guests. "We must speak of Lord Grayson's past," he said. "What do you know of him? His life? His enemies? His loves?" Lady Margaret rolled her eyes, sitting with a huff. "I told you I met him once. A dull man obsessed with his ships and money. Nothing more." Colonel Blake leaned back, his military jacket creaking. "Knew him in business, shipping mostly. He was sharp but not always honest. Owed me money, never paid it." Dr. Wells shrugged, his pen tapping the table. "I don't know him. My letter mentioned a medical issue, that's all. I assumed he was sick." Miss Finch's hands twisted in her lap. "His cousin Eleanor was my employer. She died years ago. Grayson was kind to her, but distant." Mr. Vance's voice was low, almost a growl. "We were partners once, built a shipping company together. He took more than his share, left me with nothing. That's all you need to know." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Merci, mes amis. Each of you has a piece of the puzzle. But there is more. The photograph I found in the study, it shows a young woman with Lord Grayson. Does anyone know her?" He held up the photograph, its faded edges catching the firelight. The woman's smile was bright, her arm around a younger Grayson who looked happy, almost carefree. The guests leaned forward, their faces a mix of curiosity and unease. Miss Finch gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. That's Eleanor, his cousin." Poirot's eyebrows lifted. "Eleanor? The one you worked for, mademoiselle?" Miss Finch nodded, her eyes wide. "Yes, she was so kind. But she died. A long time ago. An accident, they said." "An accident," Poirot repeated, his voice soft. "And what kind, mademoiselle?" Miss Finch hesitated, her cheeks pale. "A fall. Down the stairs here at Blackwood Hall. I wasn't there when it happened. I left before." Poirot's mind raced. A fall. An accident. Or something else. He turned to the others. "Does anyone else know of this Eleanor?" Lady Margaret shrugged. "Never heard of her. Grayson never mentioned family." Colonel Blake shook his head. "Not my business. I dealt with his money, not his life." Dr. Wells frowned. "A fall? That's tragic. But I don't know her." Mr. Vance's eyes darkened. "Eleanor Grayson. I remember her. Pretty girl. Full of life. Her death hit Grayson hard. He changed after that." Poirot nodded, slipping the photograph back into his pocket. Eleanor Grayson. A name that tied the past to the present. He needed to know more, but the guests' faces told him they were holding back. Secrets, like shadows, clung to this house. "Let us explore further," Poirot said. "The past is here, in these walls. We must find it." He led them to the staircase, a grand, curving thing that rose into the darkness of the upper floors. The moan had come from above, and Poirot's instincts told him answers waited there. The butler handed him a second lantern, and the group climbed the stairs, their footsteps echoing in the quiet. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper, as they reached a long hallway lined with doors. "Guest rooms," the butler said, his voice flat. "Lord Grayson's is at the end." Poirot nodded, leading the way. The hallway was lined with more paintings, their eyes seeming to watch every step. One caught his attention, a portrait of a woman, her face strikingly like the one in the photograph. Eleanor, he guessed. Her smile was frozen in paint, but her eyes held a sadness that made his heart twinge. At the end of the hall, they reached a heavy door, its wood carved with intricate patterns. Poirot tried the handle, but it was locked. He pulled out the key. From the library, its tarnished surface glinting in the lantern light. It fit perfectly, and the lock clicked open. The room was large, with a four-poster bed, a wardrobe, and a desk by a window. The curtains were open, showing the dark night outside. The room felt empty but not abandoned. A coat hung on a chair. A book lay open on the desk, its pages marked with a ribbon. Poirot moved to the desk, his eyes scanning for clues. A letter, half written, caught his attention. It was in Grayson's handwriting, the same as the notes. "To my dearest," it began. "The years have not dulled my regret. Your loss haunts me, and I know now the truth was hidden. I have brought them here to uncover it, to right the wrong. If I fail, trust the little detective. He sees what others cannot." Poirot's heart quickened. The little detective. That was him. Grayson had planned for his presence, had trusted him to solve this puzzle. But who was my dearest? Eleanor? Someone else? He turned to the guests, holding up the letter. "This speaks of a wrong, a truth hidden. Does anyone know what Lord Grayson meant?" Miss Finch's eyes filled with tears. "Eleanor, she whispered. He loved her, not as a cousin, but more. I saw it when I worked for her. He was heartbroken when she died." Lady Margaret's voice was sharp. "Love? That's what this is about? Some old romance?" Poirot shook his head. "Not just love, madame, a wrong, a truth, perhaps a crime." Colonel Blake's face reddened. "Crime? You're saying someone killed her?" "I say nothing yet," Poirot said, "but the past speaks and we must listen." They searched the room, finding little else. A few letters, business papers, a locket with a curl of dark hair. Poirot tucked the locket away, another clue for his growing collection. As they left the room, another moan echoed closer now from somewhere deeper in the house. The guests froze, their faces pale. "That's no wind," Dr. Wells said, his voice trembling. "That's a person." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Then we shall find them. The past is calling, and Hercule Poirot answers." Chapter 6. The Locked Room Puzzle. The hallway of Blackwood Hall seemed to grow darker as Hercule Poirot led the group away from Lord Grayson's bedroom, the echo of the mysterious moan still lingering in their ears. The lantern in his hand cast a weak glow, barely pushing back the shadows that clung to the walls. His sharp eyes, bright as ever, darted from the faded paintings to the tense faces of the guests trailing behind him. Lady Margaret Hale's heels clicked sharply, her green dress a splash of color in the gloom. Colonel Reginald Blake marched with heavy steps, his red face set in a scowl. Dr. Simon Wells clutched his glasses, his nervous fidgeting louder than his footsteps. Miss Clara Finch stayed close to the group, her plain gray dress blending into the shadows, her hands twisting with fear. Mr. Harold Vance walked slowly, his gray beard hiding his thoughts, but his eyes glinted with something sharp. Suspicion. Perhaps Poirot's mind was a whirl of clues. The key from the library, the cryptic notes about shadows and the past, the photograph of Eleanor Grayson, the locket with a curl of hair, and the half-written letter in Grayson's room that called him the little detective. The latest note, found in the secret passage, had urged them to look deeper to the past, and that moan, human not wind, suggested someone or something was close. Poirot's theory that Lord Grayson was alive and orchestrating this mystery to expose a traitor felt stronger with every step. But he needed proof, and Blackwood Hall was hiding it in its shadows. The moan had come from the upper floors, and Poirot's instincts told him to follow it. "Mes amis," he said, his voice calm but firm. "We must find the source of this sound. It is, I believe, another piece of our puzzle." Lady Margaret rolled her eyes, her voice sharp. "Another wild chase? This house is a maze, and I'm tired of running after noises." Colonel Blake grunted, his fist clenched. "If Grayson's playing games, I'll drag him out myself. Enough of this nonsense." Dr. Wells pushed his glasses up, his hands shaky. It sounded human. What if someone's hurt? Miss Finch's voice was a whisper, barely audible. "I don't like this. It feels like the house is watching us." Mr. Vance's low voice cut through the tension. "Grayson's clever. If he's behind this, the noise is no accident. He wants us to find something." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Exactement, monsieur. And find it we shall." He led them up another staircase, narrower and steeper than the last, its wooden steps creaking under their weight. The air grew colder, the shadows thicker. as they reached a landing with a single door at the end of a short hallway. The door was heavy, made of dark wood, with a brass lock that gleamed in the lantern light. Poirot tried the handle. Locked. He pulled the tarnished key from his pocket, the one he'd found beside the broken vase in the library. It slid into the lock with a soft click, and the door swung open, revealing a small, dusty room. The air was stale, smelling of old cloth and damp wood. A single window, its curtains torn, let in a sliver of moonlight. On the floor near a rickety table lay a scarf, a delicate thing, white but stained with dark red splotches. Blood. Miss Finch gasped, stepping back. "Is that blood?" Dr. Wells knelt beside the scarf, his hands trembling as he examined. It's blood, all right. Fresh, I'd say. Not more than a day old. Colonel Blake's face reddened. "Blood? Then Grayson's dead, not hiding. Your theory's rubbish, Poirot." Poirot raised a hand, his calm unshaken. "No, monsieur. A scarf with blood is not a body, it is a clue, nothing more." "And clues, they speak to Hercule Poirot." Lady Margaret crossed her arms, her lips tight. "A clue to what? That someone's been hurt? Or worse?" Mr. Vance's eyes narrowed. "It's a plant. Grayson's trying to scare us, make us turn on each other." Poirot knelt beside the scarf, his fingers careful not to touch it. The blood was indeed fresh, the stains uneven as if smeared deliberately. He looked around the room, his eyes catching every detail. The dust on the floor disturbed by footprints. The table, wobbly but clean. The window slightly ajar, letting in a cold draft. The footprints were small, like the one in the fireplace, and they led to the window. He stood, his mind racing. A locked room, a blood-stained scarf, footprints, and a moan. The puzzle was growing, and he was beginning to see its shape. "This room," Poirot said, standing, "is locked for a reason. It holds a secret, one Lord Grayson wishes us to find. The scarf, the blood, they are part of his game." Lady Margaret scoffed. "Game? You're obsessed with this idea that Grayson's alive, pulling strings like some puppet master. What, if he's lying dead somewhere and this is a murderer's trick?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "A fair question, madame, but consider. A murderer leaves a body, or blood in great quantity. This scarf, it is too precise. It is placed here, in a locked room, for us to find. Why?" Dr. Wells frowned, his glasses slipping. "To scare us, or to point to something?" "Exactement," Poirot said. "It points. To the past, perhaps, or to one of you." The guests shifted, their eyes darting to each other. Miss Finch's hands trembled, and she stepped closer to Dr. Wells. Colonel Blake's scowl deepened, his fists still clenched. Mr. Vance's fingers tapped the table, a slow, steady rhythm. Lady Margaret's face was a mask, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Poirot moved to the window, pushing it open. The night air was cold, sharp with the scent of pine. Below, the grounds of Blackwood Hall stretched into darkness, the trees swaying in the wind. He leaned out, checking the ledge. A faint scratch mark, barely visible, ran along the stone. Someone had been here, perhaps climbing in or out. He closed the window and turned back to the room. "Let us search this room," he said. "Every corner, every shadow. The truth hides, but not from Hercule Poirot." The guests spread out, their movements slow and cautious. Colonel Blake checked the table, finding nothing but dust. Dr. Wells examined the walls, tapping for hidden panels. Miss Finch stayed near the door, her eyes wide, too scared to touch anything. Mr. Vance knelt by the scarf, his face unreadable. Lady Margaret flipped through a stack of old papers on a shelf, muttering about the dust. Poirot focused on the footprints. They were faint, smudged, but clear enough to follow. They led from the scarf to the window, then back to a corner where a small rug lay crooked. He lifted the rug, revealing a trap door, its edges flush with the floor. The guests gathered around, their breath catching. "A trap door," Dr. Wells said, his voice high. "Where does it go?" Poirot's mustache twitched. "To more secrets, I suspect. He pulled the trapdoor open, revealing a narrow ladder descending into darkness. The air that rose from it was cold, smelling of earth and stone. "We must explore, but with care." Colonel Blake pushed forward. "I'm going down. If Grayson's hiding, I'll find him." "Non, monsieur," Poirot said, his voice firm. "We go together or not at all. A house like this is full of dangers." The butler, who had been standing silently by the door, stepped forward with another lantern. "I'll fetch more light, sir," he said, his voice flat but his eyes flickering with something Poirot couldn't quite read. As the butler left, Poirot lit the second lantern and led the group down the ladder. The passage below was narrow, its walls damp and rough. The air grew colder, the silence heavier. The moan came again, softer now, but closer. Miss Finch whimpered, clutching Dr. Wells's arm. Poirot's heart beat faster, not with fear, but with the thrill of the chase. The puzzle was unfolding and he was close to its heart. The passage ended at another door, this one unlocked. Poirot pushed it open, revealing a small cellar, its walls lined with shelves of old bottles and crates. In the center stood a wooden chest, its lid ajar. Inside was another scarf, identical to the one upstairs, but clean, no blood. Beside it lay a single rose, wilted but still red. "A rose," Poirot said, lifting it carefully. "A symbol, perhaps, of love or loss." Miss Finch's eyes widened. Eleanor loved roses. She grew them in the garden here. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. Eleanor Grayson, the woman in the photograph, the cousin who died in an accident. The scarves, the rose, the moans, all pointed to her, to a truth buried in the past. He turned to the guests, his voice steady. "This rose, this scarf, they are messages. Lord Grayson is telling us to look to Eleanor, to her death. Someone here knows more than they say." Lady Margaret's face tightened. "This is ridiculous. You're building a story out of nothing." Colonel Blake's voice was gruff. "If it's about Eleanor, why drag us here? I didn't know the girl." Dr. Wells shook his head. "Nor I. This is too strange." Mr. Vance's eyes gleamed. "Grayson loved her. If he thinks her death wasn't an accident, he's after someone. One of us." Miss Finch's voice broke. "It was an accident. I told you she fell." Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice was firm. "Perhaps, mademoiselle. But accidents, they can hide truths. And I, Hercule Poirot, will find them." They returned to the parlor, the new scarf and rose in Poirot's hands. The fire was nearly out. The room colder now. The guests sat, their faces pale, their eyes avoiding each other. Poirot stood by the fireplace, the portrait of Lord Grayson watching him. The blood-stained scarf, the clean one, the rose, the moans, the locked room, all fit his theory. Grayson was alive, staging this to uncover a truth about Eleanor's death. But who was the traitor? And where was Grayson hiding as? The clock struck midnight. Another moan echoed, sharp and clear from the hallway. The guests froze, their eyes on Poirot. He smiled, a small, certain smile. "The game continues," he said, "and Hercule Poirot plays to win." Chapter 7. A Night of Tensions. The parlor of Blackwood Hall was cloaked in shadows, the fire now a faint glow of embers that did little to warm the chilly room. Hercule Poirot stood near the fireplace, his small, neat figure a calm anchor amid the growing unease of the guests. His sharp eyes, gleaming like polished stones, moved from face to face, reading their fear, their anger, their secrets. Lady Margaret Hale sat stiffly, her green dress crumpled from hours of restless waiting, her lips pressed into a thin line. Colonel Reginald Blake gripped a glass of wine, his red face darker now, his jaw tight with frustration. Dr. Simon Wells fidgeted with his glasses, his nervous energy like a buzzing fly. Miss Clara Finch huddled in a corner, her gray dress blending into the gloom, her hands trembling as she clutched a handkerchief. Mr. Harold Vance leaned back in his chair, his gray beard hiding his expression, but his fingers tapped a slow, steady rhythm, betraying his alertness. Poirot's mind was a whirl of clues, the cryptic letters, the key from the library, the blood-stained scarf, the clean scarf with the wilted rose. The photograph of Eleanor Grayson, the locket with a curl, of hair, the footprint in the fireplace, the secret passage, and the half-written letter calling him the little detective. Each piece pointed to his theory. Lord Grayson was alive, orchestrating a game to expose a traitor tied to Eleanor's death years ago. The latest moan, sharp and human, had come from the hallway just moments ago, sending a shiver through the group. Poirot's mustache twitched. The house was speaking and he was listening. "Mes amis," Poirot said, his voice clear and steady. "The night grows late and the mystery deepens. The sound we heard, it is no accident. It is a message, a call to keep searching." "Lady," Margaret's voice was sharp, cutting through the quiet. "A message, it's a trick, nothing more. This house is old and creaky and I'm tired of chasing ghosts." Colonel Blake slammed his glass on the table, wine sloshing over the edge. "Enough of this nonsense. If Grayson's alive, as you say, where is he? I'm not sitting here while he plays games with us." Dr. Wells pushed his glasses up, his hands shaky. That moan. It was human. What if someone's hurt? Or trapped? Miss Finch's voice was a whisper, barely audible over the faint crackle of the fire. "I saw something. Just now, in the hallway, a shadow. It looked like a man." The room went still, every eye turning to her. Poirot's heart quickened, but his face stayed calm. "A shadow, mademoiselle?" "Describe it, s'il vous plaît." Miss Finch swallowed, her eyes wide with fear. "It was tall, thin. It moved fast. Near the staircase, I think it was Lord Grayson." Lady Margaret laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "Grayson's shadow? Now we're seeing ghosts? This is absurd." Mr. Vance's eyes narrowed, his fingers pausing their tapping. "If Clara saw something, it's worth checking. Grayson's clever. He'd know how to stay hidden." "Colonel." Blake stood, his chair scraping the floor. "I'm going to look. Shadow or not, I'm done waiting." Poirot raised a hand, his voice firm. "No, monsieur. We do not rush into shadows without a plan. A house like this, with its passages and secrets, is no place for haste." The colonel glared but sat down, muttering under his breath. Poirot turned to Miss Finch, his eyes gentle but probing. "Mademoiselle, where exactly did you see this shadow?" Miss Finch pointed to the doorway. "There, just past the hall. It was gone so fast, but it moved toward the stairs." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. A shadow, moving fast, near the stairs. It fit his theory. Grayson, alive, watching them, leaving clues to keep them on edge. But why show himself now, even as a shadow? He needed to see the hallway, to find the next piece of the puzzle. "Let us investigate," Poirot said, picking up the lantern from the table. "But together and with care. The truth is close, and we must not scare it away." The guests followed, their footsteps heavy with reluctance. The butler, silent as ever, stood by the door, his blank face giving nothing away. Poirot led the way into the hallway, the lantern casting long, flickering shadows on the walls. The air was cold, the painting's eyes seeming to follow them. The staircase loomed ahead, its dark wood curving into the upper floors where the moan had come from. Poirot paused at the foot of the stairs, his eyes scanning the floor. A faint scuff mark, barely visible, caught his attention. It was fresh, the dust disturbed, as if someone had passed recently. He knelt, his fingers brushing the mark. "Someone was here," he said, his voice low. "Not long ago." Dr. Wells peered over his shoulder, his glasses glinting. "A footprint? Like the one in the fireplace?" "Similar," Poirot said, standing. "But larger. A man's, perhaps." Miss Finch shivered, her handkerchief pressed to her lips. "It was him. I know it was." Lady Margaret crossed her arms. "Or it was the butler sneaking around, or one of us for that matter." Poirot's eyes flicked to the butler, who stood at the edge of the group, his hands clasped behind his back. "Monsieur," Poirot said, "have you been in this hallway recently?" The butler's face remained blank. "No, sir. I was in the kitchen preparing tea." Poirot nodded, but his mind noted the butler's steady voice, the lack of hesitation. Too steady, perhaps. He would watch him closely. They climbed the stairs, the lantern's light bouncing off the walls. The upper hallway was narrower, lined with more doors, each one closed and silent. The moan came again, softer now, from somewhere. To the right. Poirot's heart beat faster, not with fear, but with the thrill of the chase. He led them toward the sound, stopping at a door that looked older than the others, its wood chipped and faded. He tried the handle. Locked. He pulled the key from his pocket, the one from the library, but it didn't fit. Curious, he murmured, his fingers brushing the lock. It was new, unlike the door, its brass shiny and unscratched. Colonel Blake pushed forward. Break it down. If Grayson's in there, I want answers. Non, monsieur, Poirot said, his voice sharp. Force is not the answer. Precision is. He turned to the butler. Do you have a key for this door? The butler shook his head. No, sir. That room is rarely used. Lord Grayson kept it locked. Poirot's mustache twitched. A locked room, a moan, a shadow. The puzzle was growing, and he was close to a breakthrough. We will find a way in, he said. But first, let us search the hallway. The guests spread out, their movements tense. Dr. Wells tapped the walls, looking for hidden panels. Lady Margaret checked a nearby table, flipping through a stack of old letters. Miss Finch stayed close to Poirot, her eyes darting to every shadow. Mr. Vance examined the floor, his fingers tracing the edges of the carpet. Poirot moved to a small alcove, where a dusty mirror hung on the wall. The glass was cracked, but in its reflection he saw something, a faint outline high on the wall like a seam. He reached up, his fingers finding a hidden catch. A panel clicked open, revealing a narrow shelf with a single object. A small, leather-bound diary. He opened it, the pages yellowed but legible. The handwriting was different from Grayson's, softer, more flowing. A woman's, he guessed. The first entry read, Edmund is kind, but distant. He carries a weight I cannot reach. I fear for him, for us. The name at the bottom was Eleanor. Poirot's heart quickened. Eleanor Grayson, the cousin who died, the woman in the photograph. This diary was hers, hidden here for a reason. He flipped through the pages, finding more entries about her life at Blackwood Hall, her love for roses, her fears about a shadow in the house. One entry caught his eye. Someone watches me. I hear footsteps at night. Edmund says it's nothing, but I'm not sure. He closed the diary, slipping it into his pocket. Mes amis, he said, turning to the group. We have found another piece of the past. Eleanor Grayson's diary. It speaks of fear, of someone watching her. This is no coincidence. Miss Finch's eyes filled with tears. Eleanor. She was so scared near the end I should have stayed with her. Lady Margaret's voice was sharp. A diary. That proves nothing. Old fears don't mean murder. Colonel Blake grunted. If someone was stalking her, maybe they pushed her down. Those stairs. Dr. Wells frowned. But why bring us here now? What does her death have to do with us? Mr. Vance's voice was low. Grayson thinks one of us knows something. Maybe one of us was there when she died. Poirot nodded, his mind sorting the clues. The diary, the scarves, the rose, the moans, the shadow, all pointed to Eleanor's death, to a truth Grayson wanted uncovered. His theory held. Grayson was alive, using this game to expose a killer or a betrayer. Another moan came, louder, from behind the locked door. The guests froze, their faces pale. Poirot's eyes gleamed. We must open this door, he said. The truth waits inside. The butler returned with a ring of keys, his face still blank. One of these may work, sir, he said, handing them to Poirot. Poirot tried each key, his fingers steady. The third one clicked, and the door swung open, revealing a small, dark room. The air was heavy, smelling of dust and something sharp, metal perhaps. In the center, on a small table, lay a single candle, unlit, and beside it, a letter. Poirot read it aloud. The shadow moves. The truth is near. Ask the governess. The guests turned to Miss Finch, who shrank back, her face white. Me? I don't know anything. Poirot's voice was gentle but firm. Mademoiselle, the past is speaking, and you, I think, have more to say. The night was far from over, and Hercule Poirot was ready to listen. Chapter 8. The Hidden Motive. The small dark room at the end of the hallway in Blackwood Hall felt like a cage, its heavy air pressing against Hercule Poirot and the guests. The lantern's weak glow flickered, casting eerie shadows on the dusty walls. The table in the center held a single unlit candle and a letter, its words still ringing in Poirot's mind. The shadow moves. The truth is near. Ask the governess. Miss Clara Finch, the governess, stood frozen near the door, her plain gray dress blending into the gloom, her face pale as moonlight. Her wide eyes darted between the guests, her hands clutching her handkerchief so tightly it seemed it might tear. Poirot's sharp eyes studied her, noting every tremble, every glance, the clues he'd gathered, the key from the library, the blood-stained scarf, the clean scarf with the wilted rose, the photograph of Eleanor Grayson, the locket with a curl of hair, the footprint in the fireplace, the secret passage, Eleanor's diary, and the cryptic notes pointed to a truth tied to Eleanor's death years ago. His theory, that Lord Grayson was alive and staging this mystery to expose a traitor, grew stronger with each discovery. The latest note, singling out Miss Finch, was a bold move, and Poirot knew it was time to dig deeper. Mes amis, he said, his voice calm but firm. This letter tells us to ask Mademoiselle Finch. She holds a piece of the puzzle, perhaps the key to Lord Grayson's game. Mademoiselle, will you speak? Miss Finch's breath caught, her eyes filling with tears. I don't know anything, she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. I told you I worked for Eleanor, his cousin. That's all. Lady Margaret Hale, standing with her arms crossed, her green dress catching the lantern's light, let out a sharp laugh. Oh, come now, Clara, you're shaking like a leaf. What are you hiding? Colonel Reginald Blake, his red face glowing in the dim light, leaned forward. Spit it out, girl. If Grayson's pointing at you, there's a reason. Dr. Simon Wells adjusted his glasses, his nervous hands fumbling. Maybe she doesn't know anything. The note could be wrong. Mr. Harold Vance, his gray beard hiding his expression, spoke in a low growl. Grayson doesn't make mistakes. If he says ask her, she knows something. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the group. His eyes stayed on Miss Finch, gentle but unyielding, like a teacher waiting for an answer. Mademoiselle, the truth is a heavy burden, but it is lighter when shared. Tell us about Eleanor, about Lord Grayson, about the past. Miss Finch's lips trembled and she sank into a chair, her handkerchief pressed to her face. The room was quiet, the only sound the faint creak of the old house and the distant howl of the wind outside. Poirot waited, his small frame still, his mind sharp as a blade. He knew pressure could break a secret open, but so could kindness. Finally, Miss Finch spoke, her voice soft and broken. Eleanor. She was more than my employer. She was my friend. She was kind, always smiling, always tending her roses in the garden, but she was sad too. She loved Edmund Lord Grayson, not as a cousin, but more. They were close, so close, but something kept them apart. Poirot's mustache twitched. Something, mademoiselle? Or someone? Miss Finch's eyes flicked to the floor, avoiding his gaze. I don't know. She never said, but she was scared. Near the end, she heard noises at night, footsteps in the halls. She told me she felt watched, like someone was waiting for her to make a mistake. Lady Margaret snorted. A nervous girl, imagining things. Hardly a mystery. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Non, madame. Fear is not imagination. It is a signal, a warning. Continue, mademoiselle. Miss Finch swallowed, her hands twisting the handkerchief. The night she died, I wasn't here. I'd left Blackwood Hall a week before. She sent me away, said it was for my safety. I didn't understand, but I went. Then I heard she fell. Down the stairs. They called it an accident, but Edmund never believed it. He came to me months later asking questions. He thought someone pushed her. Colonel Blake's voice was gruff. Pushed? That's a serious claim. Any proof? Miss Finch shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. No. Just feelings. Edmund was broken after she died. He changed, became distant, locked himself away. He said he'd find the truth. No matter what. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. Eleanor's death, a fall down the stairs, labeled an accident but doubted by Grayson. The diary's mention of a shadow watching her, the scarves, the rose, all pointed to a truth Grayson was forcing them to uncover. His theory held. Grayson was alive, using this game to expose a killer. But Miss Finch's story added a new peace love and a motive tied to it. Mademoiselle, Poirot said, his voice soft. Why did Lord Grayson invite you here? What does he believe you know? Miss Finch's eyes widened, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know. My letter said to come, that it was about Eleanor. I thought maybe he found something, some proof. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And this proof, it is here, in this house, hidden in the shadows, as he says. Dr. Wells frowned, his glasses slipping. But why us? I didn't know Eleanor. I'm just a doctor. Mr. Vance's voice was low. Grayson thinks one of us is connected to her death. That's why we're here. Lady Margaret's face tightened. This is ridiculous. I had nothing to do with some girl's accident years ago. Colonel Blake grunted. Nor I. Grayson's chasing ghosts and we're caught in his net. Poirot clasped his hands behind his back, pacing slowly. Perhaps, mes amis, you are all connected in ways you do not yet see. A business deal, a debt, a secret. Something ties you to Eleanor's death, and Grayson knows it. The room fell silent, the guests' faces a mix of fear and suspicion. The butler standing by the door cleared his throat. Shall I fetch more tea, sir? He asked, his voice flat. Poirot's eyes flicked to him. Non, merci. But tell me, monsieur, did you know Eleanor Grayson? The butler's face remained blank, but his eyes flickered just for a moment. I served at Blackwood Hall when she was here, sir. A kind lady. Her death was a tragedy. Poirot nodded, filing away the butler's response. A tragedy, yes, but perhaps more. He turned back to the group. We must search again. This house holds more secrets and we will find them. He led them back to the hallway, the lantern casting long shadows. The moan came again, softer now, from somewhere below. Poirot's heart quickened. The house was alive with clues, and he was close to a breakthrough. They descended the stairs, the air growing colder, the shadows deeper. The parlor was empty, the fire out, leaving only a faint smell of ash. Poirot moved to the fireplace where the portrait of Lord Grayson hung, its sharp eyes watching. He studied it, noting the faint outline of a rose in the background, like the one they'd found. Eleanor's rose, he murmured. A symbol of love and loss. Miss Finch's voice broke the silence. She painted that. The rose, I mean. She loved to paint. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Then this portrait is a clue. It points us to her story. He turned to the group, his voice firm. We will search the lower floors, where the moan came from. But first, mademoiselle, he said, looking at Miss Finch, is there anything else you remember? Anything Eleanor said or did that might help us? Miss Finch hesitated, her eyes distant. There was a locket. She wore it always with a curl of hair inside. She said it was from someone she loved. I thought it was Edmund's, but she never said. Poirot's hand went to his pocket, where the locket from Grayson's room rested. This locket, perhaps? He held it up, its silver surface catching the lantern light. Miss Finch gasped. Yes, that's hers. The guests crowded around, their eyes wide. Lady Margaret's voice was sharp. A locket? What does that prove? It proves, Poirot said, that Eleanor's story is at the heart of this mystery, and someone here knows why. The moan came again, sharp and clear, from the direction of the kitchen. Poirot's smile was small but certain. "The truth calls," he said, and Hercule Poirot answers. Chapter 9. The Second Disappearance. The kitchen of Blackwood Hall was cold and dim, the lantern's light barely reaching the corners where shadows clung like cobwebs. Hercule Poirot stood near the heavy wooden table, his small, neat figure a beacon of calm amid the growing panic of the guests. His sharp eyes, bright as polished coins, darted from face to face, reading their fear, their suspicion, their secrets. Lady Margaret Hale stood with her arms crossed, her green dress wrinkled from the long night, her lips tight with irritation. Dr. Simon Wells fidgeted with his glasses, his nervous energy filling the room like a hum. Miss Clara Finch hovered near the door, her plain gray dress blending into the gloom, her handkerchief crumpled in her trembling hands. Mr. Harold Vance leaned against a counter, his gray beard hiding his expression, but his eyes gleamed with a quiet intensity. Colonel Reginald Blake was missing. Moments ago, the group had been in the parlor, shaken by Miss Finch's revelation about Eleanor Grayson's locket and her fear of being watched before her death. The moan, sharp and human, had drawn them to the kitchen, chasing the sound that seemed to taunt them. But when they reached the kitchen, Colonel Blake, who had been grumbling about Lord Grayson's games, was gone. No sound, no struggle, just gone, as if the house had swallowed him. Poirot's mind buzzed with clues. The cryptic letters, the key from the library, the blood-stained scarf, the clean scarf with the wilted rose, the photograph of Eleanor, the locket with a curl of hair, the footprint in the fireplace, the secret passage, Eleanor's diary, and the notes pointing to a truth tied to her death. His theory, that Lord Grayson was alive, orchestrating a game to expose a traitor, felt stronger with every twist. The latest note, urging them to ask the governess, had pushed Miss Finch to reveal her connection to Eleanor's love for Grayson. Now, Colonel Blake's disappearance added a new layer to the puzzle, and Poirot's instincts told him it was no accident. "Mes amis," Poirot said, his voice steady despite the tension. "Colonel Blake is gone, but we must not panic. This is another move in Lord Grayson's game, a deliberate step to unsettle us." Lady Margaret's voice was sharp, cutting through the quiet. "Another move? You're obsessed with this game nonsense. First Grayson vanishes, now Blake? This isn't a game, it's madness." Dr. Wells pushed his glasses up, his hands shaking. "He was right behind us. How could he just disappear? What if something's happened to him?" Miss Finch's voice was a whisper, her eyes wide with fear. "The house, and it's taking us one by one." Mr. Vance's low growl broke the silence. "Grayson's doing this. He's picking us off, testing us. Blake must have done something to set him off." Poirot raised a hand, his calm silencing their chatter. "Non, monsieur. Colonel Blake's disappearance is not an attack. It is a clue, a piece of the puzzle. We must find him, and the truth will follow." He moved to the center of the kitchen, the lantern casting long shadows across the stone floor. The room was large, with a heavy stove, shelves of pots, and a door leading to a pantry. The air smelled of old spices and damp stone. Poirot's eyes scanned the floor, searching for signs of Blake. A faint scuff mark, like the one in the hallway, caught his attention near the pantry door. He knelt, his fingers brushing the mark. "Someone passed here," he said. "Recently." "Doctor," Wells peered over his shoulder. "Blake? Could he have gone into the pantry?" Poirot stood, his cane tapping the floor. "Perhaps. Or perhaps he was taken." He moved to the pantry door, its wood warped from years of damp. It was ajar, just enough to let a sliver of darkness show through. He pushed it open, the lantern revealing a small room lined with shelves of jars and sacks. At the far end on the floor lay a folded piece of paper. Poirot picked it up, his fingers careful. The handwriting was different from Grayson's, sloppier, hurried. He read it aloud. "I know what you did. You can't hide. I'm coming for you, Blake." The guests gasped, their eyes wide. Lady Margaret's face tightened. Blake wrote that? Who's he accusing? Dr. Wells shook his head, his glasses slipping. It doesn't make sense. Why would he leave a note and vanish? Miss Finch's voice trembled. What if he's gone after someone, or someone got him? Mr. Vance's eyes narrowed. The note's a fake. Grayson's playing us, making us turn on each other. Poirot's mustache twitched. Exactement, monsieur. This note is not Colonel Blake's. The handwriting is wrong. Too rushed. Too unlike a military man's precision. This is a forgery, meant to stir suspicion. Lady Margaret crossed her arms. Suspicion? It's working. Blake's gone and now we're supposed to think one of us is a target? This is ridiculous, Poirot's eyes gleamed. Not ridiculous, madame. Deliberate. Lord Grayson wants us to doubt, to question. This note is a misdirection, but it tells us something. The truth is close and someone is afraid. He moved back to the kitchen, his cane tapping a steady rhythm. The scuff mark led to a back door, half hidden behind a rack of pots. He pushed the rack aside, revealing a rusty handle. The door creaked open, letting in a gust of cold night air. Outside, the grounds of Blackwood Hall stretched into darkness, the trees swaying in the wind. Poirot held the lantern high, its light catching a faint trail of footprints in the muddy grass leading toward the garden. We must follow, he said, his voice firm. Colonel Blake, or someone pretending to be him, went this way. The guests hesitated, their faces pale. Miss Finch clutched her handkerchief, her eyes wide. Outside? At night? It's not safe. Dr. Wells nodded, his voice shaky. What if it's a trap? Mr. Vance's voice was low. If it's Grayson, he's leading us somewhere. We can't stop now. Lady Margaret sighed, her heels clicking as she stepped forward. Fine, but if I ruin my dress, someone's paying for it. Poirot led them into the garden, the lantern's light cutting through the darkness. The air was sharp with the scent of wet earth and roses, reminding him of the wilted rose found with the clean scarf. The footprints led to a stone path, winding through overgrown bushes and flower beds. In the distance, a small greenhouse glowed faintly, its glass panes reflecting the moonlight. As they approached, another moan echoed, soft but clear, from inside the greenhouse. Miss Finch gasped, grabbing Dr. Wells's arm. Poirot's heart quickened, but his face stayed calm. Stay close, he said, pushing open the greenhouse door. The air inside was warm, heavy with the smell of soil and flowers. Rows of roses, red and white, lined the shelves, their petals drooping in the dim light. At the far end, near a workbench, lay a crumpled jacket, Colonel Blake's military jacket, its brass buttons glinting. Beside it was another note in the same sloppy handwriting. You can't run. I know. Poirot knelt, examining the jacket. No blood, no tears, but it was warm, as if recently worn. Colonel Blake was here, he said, or someone wants us to think so. Lady Margaret's voice was sharp. Another note? This is getting old. Where's Blake? Dr. Wells's glasses slipped, his hands trembling. What if he's dead? Miss Finch's voice broke. It's the house. It's taking us. Mr. Vance's eyes gleamed. Grayson's doing this. He's moving, us like chess pieces. Poirot stood, the note in his hand. This is no murder, mes amis. This is a game, and Colonel Blake is part of it, willingly or not. The jacket, the note, they are clues, meant to push us toward the truth. He moved to the workbench, his eyes catching a small vial of red liquid, its cap loose. He sniffed at paint, not blood. Another misdirection. The blood on the scarf, he said. It was paint, I suspect. A trick to scare us. Lady Margaret's eyes narrowed. Paint? So no one's hurt? Not yet, Poirot said. But the danger is real. Someone is playing a part, and we must find them. They searched the greenhouse, finding nothing else. No footprints, no more notes. The moan came again, faint now, from the direction of the house. Poirot led them back, his mind sorting the clues. The forged note, the jacket, the paint all fit his theory. Grayson was alive, staging disappearances to expose a killer tied to Eleanor's death. But who was helping him? And where was Blake? Back in the parlor, the fire was dead, the room cold. The butler stood by the door, his face blank. Poirot turned to him. "Monsieur, have you seen Colonel Blake?" "No, sir," the butler said, his voice flat. "I've been in the kitchen." Poirot's eyes narrowed. Too quick, too steady. He would watch the butler closely. "Mes amis," Poirot said, turning to the group. "Colonel Blake's disappearance is a test. Someone wants us to doubt, to accuse. But I, Hercule Poirot, see through the fog. The truth is near, and we will find it." The moan came again, sharp and close from the hallway. The guests froze, their eyes on Poirot. His smile was small but certain. "The game continues," he said, "and Hercule Poirot will not lose." Chapter 10. Unraveling the Clues. The parlor of Blackwood Hall was colder now, the fire long dead, leaving only a faint smell of ash in the air. Hercule Poirot stood near the center of the room, his small, neat figure a beacon of calm amid the growing fear of the guests. His sharp eyes, bright as polished coins, moved from face to face, reading their tension, their doubt, their secrets. Lady Margaret Hale sat with her arms crossed, her green dress crumpled, her lips tight with anger. Dr. Simon Wells fidgeted with his glasses, his nervous energy like a buzzing insect. Miss Clara Finch clutched her handkerchief, her plain gray dress blending into the shadows, her eyes wide with worry. Mr. Harold Vance leaned against the wall, his gray beard hiding his expression, but his fingers tapped a slow, steady rhythm, betraying his alertness. Colonel Reginald Blake was still missing, his sudden disappearance in the kitchen adding a new layer to the mystery. Poirot's mind was a whirl of clues. The cryptic letters, the key from the library, the blood-stained scarf, likely painted, the clean scarf with the wilted rose, the photograph of Eleanor Grayson, the locket with a curl of hair, the footprint in the fireplace, the secret passage, Eleanor's diary, the forged note accusing someone in Blake's name, and the military jacket found in the greenhouse. Each piece supported his theory. Lord Grayson was alive, orchestrating a game to expose a traitor tied to Eleanor's death years ago. The latest moan, heard in the hallway, and Miss Finch's sighting of a shadow had kept the group on edge. Now, Poirot's instincts told him to return to the study, where the first note about Grayson's disappearance had been found. The answers, he felt, were there, waiting in the shadows. "Mes amis," Poirot said, his voice clear and steady. "Colonel Blake's absence is another move in this game. The forged note, the jacket, the paint on the scarf, they are clues, meant to confuse but also to guide us. We must return to Lord Grayson's study. The truth hides there." Lady Margaret's voice was sharp, cutting through the quiet. "The study again? We've already torn it apart. This is a waste of time, Detective." Dr. Wells pushed his glasses up, his hands trembling. "But Blake, what if he's hurt? Shouldn't we keep looking for him?" Miss Finch's voice was a whisper, barely audible. "The house, it's alive. It's hiding him like it hid Lord Grayson." Mr. Vance's eyes gleamed. "Grayson's pulling the strings. Blake's part of it, willingly or not. The study's a good place to start." Poirot nodded, his mustache twitching. "Exactement, monsieur. The study is the heart of this house, and it holds more secrets. Let us go." He picked up the lantern, its light casting long shadows as he led the group out of the parlor. The hallway was dark, the paintings on the walls watching with silent eyes. The air was cold, smelling of old wood and dust. Poirot's cane tapped the floor, a steady rhythm that kept his thoughts in order. The guests followed, their footsteps heavy with reluctance. The butler, silent as ever, trailed behind, his blank face giving nothing away. The study was as they'd left it, the large desk cluttered with papers, the secret passage hidden behind the curtain, the cold fireplace bearing the faint footprint Poirot had noticed earlier. The portrait of Lord Grayson hung above the mantel, its sharp eyes seeming to follow them. Poirot set the lantern on the desk, his fingers brushing the wood. "This room," he said, "is where Lord Grayson planned his game. We must look closer." Moved to the desk, his eyes scanning the papers. Most were business records, shipping deals, ledgers, names. One name stood out: Margaret Hale, tied to a large sum of money. He glanced at Lady Margaret, who was examining a bookshelf with exaggerated boredom. A connection, perhaps, but not enough. He opened a drawer, finding a small, leather-bound journal, its cover worn but intact. The handwriting inside was Grayson's, the same neat script as the notes. Poirot opened it, his heart quickening. The first page read, "To catch a traitor, one must set a trap. They are here, all of them, tied to her death. The little detective will see what I cannot. The truth is in the shadows, but the past is the key," he read aloud, his voice clear in the quiet room. "Lord Grayson planned this, mes amis. He brought us here to uncover a truth about Eleanor's death. He believes one of you knows more than you say." Lady Margaret's face tightened. "This, again? I told you I barely knew the man and I never met his cousin." Dr. Wells frowned, his glasses slipping. "But why me? I had no connection to Eleanor." Miss Finch's voice trembled. "He loved her. He thinks someone hurt her." Mr. Vance's eyes narrowed. "Grayson's no fool. If he wrote this, he has proof somewhere." Poirot flipped through the journal, its pages filled with coded notes, numbers, letters, symbols. One entry caught his eye. "The rose marks the truth. She knew, and they silenced her." Another mentioned a debt unpaid, with initials MH, RB, SW, CF, HV, the guest's initials. Poirot's mind raced. Grayson had suspected them all, but why? He turned to the group, holding up the journal. "This is Lord Grayson's plan. He believes Eleanor's death was no accident, and he has brought you here to prove it. The initials, yours, are here. What debt does he speak of?" Lady Margaret's voice was sharp. "Debt? I owe no one anything, least of all Grayson." Dr. Wells shook his head. "I don't understand. I never met Eleanor." Miss Finch's eyes filled with tears. I only worked for her. I didn't hurt her." Mr. Vance's voice was low. "Grayson thinks we're all guilty. He's wrong." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Not all, monsieur. One, or perhaps more. But the journal, it is clear. Grayson trusts me to find the truth." He moved to the fireplace, the footprint still there, a smudge of soot. "This mark," he said. "It is small, like a woman's. It was made after Eleanor's death, I think. Someone stood here, watching, perhaps planning," Miss Finch gasped. "Watching, like Eleanor said in her diary?" "Exactement," Poirot said. "The past and present are linked. This house, it remembers." A loud crash came from the hallway, sharp and sudden, like glass breaking. The guests jumped, their faces pale. Dr. Wells's glasses slipped off his nose, clattering to the floor. "What was that?" he stammered. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Another clue, perhaps." "Let us see." He led them to the hallway, the lantern's light bouncing off the walls. A broken vase lay in pieces near the staircase, its shards glinting in the dim light. The butler appeared, his face blank. "I heard the noise, sir," he said. "It came from here." Poirot knelt, examining the shards. They were fresh, like the vase in the library. Near them, a small piece of paper, folded tightly. He opened it, reading aloud. "The debt is old, but the payment is now. Find the rose." The guests crowded around, their breath catching. Lady Margaret's voice was sharp. "Another note? This is getting ridiculous." Mr. Vance's eyes narrowed. "The rose again, it's about Eleanor." Poirot nodded, slipping the note into his pocket. "The rose is a symbol, a thread to the past. We must find where it leads." He led them back to the study, his mind sorting the clues. The journal, with its coded notes and initials, confirmed his theory. Grayson was alive, using these clues to expose a killer. The vase, the note, the crash, they were deliberate. meant to keep the group moving, searching, doubting. "Mes amis," Poirot said, standing by the desk. "Lord Grayson's plan is clear. He believes one of you, or more, is tied to Eleanor's death. The journal, the rose, the scarves, they are his tools to uncover the truth. But we must be careful. The traitor is among us and they are watching." The moan came again, soft but clear, from somewhere above. Miss Finch whimpered, clutching her handkerchief. Dr. Wells's hands shook as he picked up his glasses. "Lady," Margaret's face was a mask of anger, but her eyes betrayed fear. Mr. Vance's fingers stopped tapping, his gaze locked on Poirot. "The truth is near," Poirot said, his voice steady, "and Hercule Poirot will find it." Chapter 11. The Confrontation. The parlor of Blackwood Hall was shrouded in a heavy silence, broken only by the faint creak of the old house settling in the night. The fire was long gone, leaving the room cold and dim, with only the lantern's flickering glow to push back the shadows. Hercule Poirot stood at the center, his small, neat figure commanding the room like a conductor before an orchestra. His sharp eyes, bright as polished coins, swept over the guests, reading their fear, their anger, their secrets. Lady Margaret, Hale, sat stiffly, her green dress crumpled from the endless hours of tension, her lips pressed into a thin line. Dr. Simon Wells fidgeted with his glasses, his nervous hands betraying his unease. Miss Clara Finch clutched her handkerchief, her plain gray dress blending into the gloom, her eyes wide with worry. Mr. Harold Vance leaned against the wall, his gray beard masking his expression, but his fingers tapped a slow, deliberate rhythm. Colonel Reginald Blake was still missing, his disappearance in the kitchen a lingering wound in the group's fragile trust. Poirot's mind was a storm of clues: the cryptic letters, the key from the library, the blood-stained scarf, likely painted, the clean scarf with the wilted rose, the photograph of Eleanor Grayson, the locket with a curl of hair, the footprint in the fireplace, the secret passage, Eleanor's diary, the forged note in Blake's name, the military jacket in the greenhouse, and the journal in Grayson's study detailing a plan to lure a traitor. Each piece strengthened his theory. Lord Grayson was alive, orchestrating a game to expose a killer tied to Eleanor's death years ago. The latest clue, a note found among the shards of a broken vase, had urged them to find the rose, pointing back to Eleanor and her love for Grayson. Now, Poirot felt the moment was right to push harder, to confront the guests and shake loose the truth. "Mes amis," he said, his voice clear and calm, cutting through the heavy air. "The hour is late, and the truth grows impatient. Lord Grayson has set this stage, and we are his players. But one among you plays a double role, hiding a secret tied to Eleanor's death. I have watched, I have listened, and now I accuse." The guests froze, their eyes locked on Poirot. Lady Margaret's voice was sharp, like a whip. "Accuse? You dare point fingers without proof?" Dr. Wells's glasses slipped, his hands trembling as he pushed them. "Accuse who? This is madness." Miss Finch's voice was a whisper, her handkerchief pressed to her lips. "Please, don't make it worse." Mr. Vance's fingers stopped tapping, his eyes narrowing. "Go on, detective. Say it." Poirot's mustache twitched, his gaze settling on Dr. Wells. "Dr. Wells," he said, his voice steady but piercing, "you have tampered with evidence, I believe, to protect someone. The blood-stained scarf in the locked room, it was you who examined it, declaring it fresh blood. Yet I suspect it was paint, a trick you knew but did not reveal. Why?" Dr. Wells's face went pale, his glasses slipping again. "Me? That's absurd. I only said what I saw." Poirot raised a hand, his calm unshaken. "Non, monsieur. You saw paint, not blood. Your hands shook when you touched the scarf, your eyes avoided mine. You know more than you say, and I ask you now, who are you protecting?" The room erupted. Lady Margaret stood, her hands on her hips. "This is outrageous, accusing a doctor of lying. You've gone too far, Poirot." Mr. Vance's voice was low, a growl. "He's got a point." Wells was quick to call it blood. Too quick. Miss Finch's eyes darted to Dr. Wells, her voice trembling. "Simon, is it true?" Dr. Wells's hands fumbled with his glasses, his voice high and shaky. I didn't lie. It looked like blood. I'm a doctor, not a chemist. I made a mistake, that's all." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his voice soft but unyielding. "A mistake, monsieur? Or a choice? You are nervous. Always adjusting your glasses, always looking away. A man with nothing to hide does not fidget so." Lady Margaret laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "So now nervousness is a crime? You're grasping at straws, detective." Poirot turned to her, his gaze sharp. "No, madame. I grasp at truth. And the truth is this. Someone in this house knows what happened to Eleanor Grayson, and Dr. Wells, I believe, has helped to hide it." Dr. Wells stood, his chair scraping the floor. "This is nonsense. I never met Eleanor. My letter said a medical matter, nothing about her death." Poirot nodded, his hands clasped behind his back. "And yet, your initials are in Lord Grayson's journal tied to a debt unpaid. You are part of his plan, monsieur, whether you know it or not." Mr. Vance leaned forward, his eyes glinting. "Grayson's clever. If he thinks Wells is hiding something, there's a reason." Miss Finch's voice broke, her tears spilling over. "Please stop fighting, we're all scared. What if Colonel Blake is dead?" Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice remained firm. "Mademoiselle, Colonel Blake is not dead, I believe. His disappearance, like the scarf, the note, the jacket, is a misdirection. Lord Grayson is alive, watching us, and he wants us to doubt, to argue, to reveal." Lady Margaret's face tightened. "You keep saying that, but where's your proof? All we have is a missing man, a missing colonel, and your wild ideas." Poirot's smile was small but certain. "Proof, madame, is in the details. The journal speaks of a traitor. The rose speaks of Eleanor. The forged note speaks of fear. And Dr. Wells, his actions speak of guilt." Dr. Wells's face reddened, his voice rising. "Guilt? I've done nothing. You're twisting everything, Poirot." Poirot stepped closer, his eyes locked on Wells. "Then tell me, monsieur, why did you examine the scarf so quickly? Why did you not test it as a doctor might? You wished us to believe it was blood, to stir panic. Who asked you to do this?" "Doctor." Wells opened his mouth, then closed it, his hands shaking. "No one. I just made a mistake." The room grew tense, the air thick with suspicion. Mr. Vance's fingers began tapping again, a slow, steady beat. Miss Finch looked at Dr. Wells, her eyes wide with doubt. Lady Margaret's gaze flicked between them, her lips curling slightly, as if enjoying the chaos. Poirot turned to the group, his voice steady. "Mes amis, this is Lord Grayson's game. He pushes us to reveal ourselves, to show our true faces. Dr. Wells, you are not the killer, I think, but you know something. Speak, and the truth will be lighter." Dr. Wells sank into his chair, his face pale. I can't. I don't know anything about Eleanor. But the scarf, I thought it was blood. I swear." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. Wells was hiding something, but not the whole truth. The killer, or traitor, was still among them, and Grayson's clues were designed to flush them out. He moved to the fireplace where the portrait of Lord Grayson hung, its eyes watching. The faint outline of a rose in the background caught his eye again, a reminder of Eleanor. "Let us search once more," Poirot said. "The parlor, the hallway, the study. There is more to find. The truth is close." The guests followed, their movements slow and wary. The butler, silent as ever, trailed behind, his blank face a mask. Poirot led them to the hallway, where the broken vases shards still lay. He knelt, examining them, and found a small key smaller than the one from the library, hidden among the pieces. He held it up, its brass glinting in the lantern light. "Another key," he said. "To another lock, another secret." Lady Margaret's voice was sharp. "Another? How many keys does this house have?" Mr. Vance's eyes gleamed. "As many as Grayson needs to keep us chasing." Poirot slipped the key into his pocket next to the journal, the locket, the notes. The house was a maze of clues, each one leading closer to the truth. They moved to the study where the journal had been found. Poirot searched the desk again, his fingers brushing a hidden catch under the drawer. A small compartment popped open, revealing a single letter sealed with a rose emblem. He opened it, reading aloud. "The truth is in the heart of the house. Find the rose. Find the traitor." Miss Finch gasped. "The rose again. It's always Eleanor." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. The rose, the scarves, the locket, the journal, all pointed to Eleanor's death, to a truth Grayson was forcing them to face. Dr. Wells's nervous denial, Blake's disappearance, the forged note. They were all part of the game. But the new key was a step forward. "We must find where this key fits," Poirot said. "It will lead us to the heart of the mystery." A moan echoed again, sharp and close, from the upper floors. The guests froze, their faces pale. Poirot's smile was small but certain. "The truth calls," he said, and Hercule Poirot answers. Chapter 12. The Heart of the House. The air in Blackwood Hall's study was thick with tension, the lantern's flickering light casting long, jagged shadows across the walls. Hercule Poirot stood by the desk, his small, neat figure a pillar of calm in the storm of fear and suspicion swirling among the guests. His sharp eyes, bright as polished coins, moved from face to face, reading their unease, their secrets, their lies. Lady Margaret Hale sat with her arms crossed, her green dress crumpled, her lips tight with frustration. Dr. Simon Wells clutched his glasses, his nervous hands trembling as he avoided Poirot's gaze. Miss Clara Finch huddled near the door, her plain gray dress blending into the gloom, her handkerchief a crumpled ball in her hands. Mr. Harold Vance leaned against a bookshelf, his gray beard masking his expression, but his eyes gleamed with a quiet intensity. Colonel Reginald Blake remained missing, his disappearance a heavy weight on the group's fraying nerves. Poirot's mind was a whirlwind of clues. The cryptic letters, the key from the library, the blood-stained scarf, painted, not blood, the clean scarf with the wilted rose, the photograph of Eleanor Grayson, the locket with a curl of hair, the footprint in the fireplace, the secret passage, Eleanor's diary, the forged note in Blake's name, the military jacket in the greenhouse, the journal detailing Grayson's plan, and the latest letter urging them to find the rose, find the traitor. The small key he'd found among the shards of the broken vase rested in his pocket, its brass cool against his fingers. The moan, heard moments ago from the upper floors, still echoed in their minds, a human sound that taunted them. Poirot's theory, that Lord Grayson was alive, staging a game to expose a killer tied to Eleanor's death, felt closer to proof with every clue. This key, he believed, would unlock the heart of the mystery. "Mes amis," Poirot said, his voice clear and steady, cutting through the heavy silence. "The note tells us to find the rose, to find the traitor. This key, it is new, and it will lead us to the heart of Blackwood Hall. We must search the upper floors, where the moan came from." Lady Margaret's voice was sharp, like a blade. "Another search? This house is a labyrinth, and we're chasing shadows. What makes you so sure this key is special?" Dr. Wells pushed his glasses up, his hands shaky. "The moan. It was close. What if it's Colonel Blake? Or Grayson?" Miss Finch's voice was a whisper, her eyes wide with fear. "The house is alive. It's watching us, guiding us." Mr. Vance's low growl broke the quiet. "Grayson's planned every step. The key's no accident. It's where he wants us to go." Poirot nodded, his mustache twitching. "Exactement, monsieur. Lord Grayson is a master of this game, and this key is his next move. Let us find where it fits." He lifted the lantern, its light bouncing off the study's walls as he led the group into the hallway. The air was cold, smelling of dust and old wood, the paintings on the walls watching with silent eyes. The staircase loomed ahead, its dark wood curving into the upper floors. Poirot's cane tapped the floor, a steady rhythm that kept his thoughts in order. The guests followed, their footsteps heavy with reluctance. The butler, silent as ever, trailed behind, his blank face a mask Poirot was beginning to distrust. The upper hallway was narrow, lined with doors, each one closed and silent. The moan had come from this direction, and Poirot's instincts told him the key's lock was near. He moved to a door at the far end, different from the others. Smaller, plainer, with a brass lock that gleamed like the key in his pocket. He tried the handle. Locked. He pulled the key out, its surface catching the lantern's light. It slid into the lock with a soft click, and the door swung open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. "A hidden chamber," Poirot said, his voice low but excited. "The heart of the house, perhaps." Lady Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Another secret passage? This house is full of them. What's down there?" Dr. Wells's voice trembled. "It could be dangerous. What if Blake's down there?" Miss Finch clutched her handkerchief, her face pale. "Or Grayson, or something else." Mr. Vance's eyes gleamed. "Only one way to find out." Poirot held the lantern high, its light barely reaching the bottom of the stairs. "Stay close," he said, stepping onto the first step. The wood creaked under his weight, the air growing colder and damper as they descended. The staircase was tight, the walls rough stone, smelling of earth and time. The guests followed, their breathing loud in the quiet. At the bottom, the stairs opened into a small circular chamber, its walls lined with shelves. In the center stood a table, covered with a white cloth, and on it a shrine, a framed portrait of Eleanor Grayson, surrounded by dried roses, a candle unlit, and a small open box containing a single letter. The air was heavy, almost sacred, as if the room had been untouched for years. Miss Finch gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Eleanor, it's her." Poirot approached the table, his eyes taking in every detail. The portrait showed Eleanor, as she was in the photograph, smiling, young, her eyes bright but sad. The roses were brittle, their red faded to brown. The letter was in Grayson's handwriting, sealed with a rose emblem. He opened it, his fingers careful, and read aloud. "To the one who finds this, Eleanor was my heart, and her death was no accident. Harold Vance, you took her from me. Your greed, your lies ended her life. The truth is here, and the little detective will prove it." The guests turned to Mr. Vance, their eyes wide with shock. His face darkened, his beard twitching as he clenched his fists. "That's a lie!" he roared, his voice echoing in the chamber. "I never touched her. Grayson's mad, spinning tales to ruin me." Lady Margaret's voice was sharp. Direct accusation? That's bold even for Grayson." Dr. Wells's glasses slipped, his hands trembling. "Mr. Vance, is it true?" Miss Finch's voice was a whisper. "Eleanor, he thinks you killed her?" Poirot raised a hand, his calm, silencing the growing storm. "Monsieur Vance, Lord Grayson names you. He believes you caused Eleanor's death. Why?" Vance's eyes blazed, his voice low and fierce. "Grayson's wrong. We were partners, yes, in the shipping business. He cheated me, took my share, left me with nothing. I hated him for it, but Eleanor, she was kind, innocent. I'd never hurt her." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his voice soft but piercing. "And yet your initials are in his journal, tied to a debt unpaid. The letter speaks of greed, of lies. What debt, monsieur?" Vance's fingers tightened, his voice a growl. "The debt was Grayson's, not mine. He owed me money, years of it. Eleanor's death had nothing to do with me." Lady Margaret crossed her arms, her lips curling. "Sounds like motive to me. You wanted revenge on Grayson, so you hurt his precious cousin." Vance turned on her, his face red. "Watch your tongue, woman, I'm no murderer." Dr. Wells stepped back, his voice shaky. "But why would Grayson accuse you? He must have proof." Poirot nodded, his hands clasped behind his back. "Proof, yes. Or belief. This shrine, this letter, they are Lord Grayson's heart, laid bare. He loved Eleanor, and he believes her death was murder. Monsieur Vance, what happened the night she died?" Vance's eyes flickered, his voice steady but strained. "I wasn't here. I left Blackwood Hall months before after Grayson ruined me. I heard about her fall like everyone else, an accident, they said." Miss Finch's voice broke, her tears spilling over. "It wasn't an accident. Edmund, Lord Grayson, never believed it. He said someone pushed her." Poirot's mustache twitched. "And this letter, it says Monsieur Vance pushed her. But why? Greed, it says. Lies. We must find the truth behind these words." He moved to the shelves, his eyes scanning for more clues. A small book tucked between two jars caught his attention. It was a ledger, its pages filled with numbers and names. One entry stood out. A payment to H.V., dated the day before Eleanor's death, marked for silence. Poirot held it up, his voice calm but firm. "Monsieur Vance, this ledger shows a payment to you, just before Eleanor died." "What was it for?" Vance's face paled, his voice rising. "That's a forgery. I never took money from Grayson, not then." Lady Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Silence, it says. Sounds like blackmail to me." Dr. Wells's voice trembled. "Blackmail? For what?" Poirot's eyes locked on Vance. "For what, monsieur? What did you know that required silence?" Vance's hands shook, his voice low. "Nothing. I swear I didn't know anything about Eleanor's death. Grayson's framing me, using you to do it." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. The ledger, the letter, the shrine, all pointed to Vance, but something felt off. Grayson's game was complex, designed to confuse as much as to reveal. Was Vance the traitor, or another pawn? The moan came again, sharp and close from somewhere above, pulling Poirot's thoughts back to the present. "We must return upstairs," he said, slipping the ledger into his pocket. "The house is speaking, and we must listen." The guests followed, their faces pale, their eyes darting to Vance. The butler, waiting at the top of the stairs, held another lantern, his face blank. Poirot led them to the parlor where the portrait of Lord Grayson hung, its rose in the background a silent reminder of Eleanor. He turned to the group, his voice steady. "Mes amis, Lord Grayson accuses Monsieur Vance, but the truth is not yet clear. The ledger, the letter, they are clues but not proof. We must keep searching, for the traitor is among us, and they are afraid." Chapter 13. The Traitor's Mask. The parlor of Blackwood Hall was cloaked in a heavy, oppressive silence, the air thick with the weight of secrets and fear. The lantern's flickering light cast eerie shadows across the walls, dancing like specters, in the dim room. Hercule Poirot stood at the center, his small, neat figure radiating a quiet authority that held the guests in thrall. His sharp eyes, bright as polished coins, swept over their faces, reading every flicker of emotion. Fear, anger, guilt. Lady Margaret Hale sat rigidly, her green dress creased from the long night, her lips pressed into a thin, defiant line. Dr. Simon Wells clutched his glasses, his nervous hands trembling as he avoided Poirot's gaze. Miss Clara Finch huddled in a corner, her plain gray dress blending into the gloom, her handkerchief a crumpled wad in her hands. Mr. Harold Vance leaned against the wall, his gray beard masking his expression, but his eyes burned with a mix of anger and unease after being accused of Eleanor Grayson's murder. Colonel Reginald Blake was still missing, his absence a gnawing wound in the group's fragile trust. Poirot's mind was a tapestry of clues, each thread carefully woven into his theory. Lord Grayson was alive, orchestrating a game to expose a killer tied to Eleanor's death years ago. The cryptic letters, the key from the library, the painted scarf, the clean scarf with the wilted rose, the photograph of Eleanor, the locket with a curl of hair, the footprint in the fireplace, the secret passage, Eleanor's diary, the forged note in Blake's name, the military jacket in the greenhouse, the journal detailing Grayson's plan, the shrine to Eleanor, and the letter accusing Mr. Vance, all pointed to a truth hidden in the past. The latest moan, heard from the hallway, had kept the group on edge, and the small key found among the vase shards had unlocked a hidden chamber, revealing Grayson's accusation against Vance. But Poirot's instincts told him the truth was more complex, and the real traitor was still masking their guilt. "Mes amis," Poirot said, his voice clear and steady, cutting through the tense silence. "We stand at the edge of the truth. Lord Grayson has led us through a maze of clues, each one pointing to Eleanor's death, a death he believes was murder. He accused Monsieur Vance, but I, Hercule Poirot, see a different hand at work. Tonight we will unmask the traitor." Lady Margaret's voice was sharp like a shard of glass. "Unmask? You've already accused Vance and now you're changing your mind. This is a farce." Dr. Wells's glasses slipped, his hands shaky. "Who then? We're all suspects in your eyes." Miss Finch's voice was a whisper, her eyes wide with fear. "Please, just tell us. I can't bear this anymore." "Mister." Vance's growl was low, his fists clenched. "Get on with it, Poirot. If it's not me, who's Grayson after?" Poirot's mustache twitched, his gaze settling on Lady Margaret. "Madame Hale," he said, his voice soft but piercing. "You have played your part well, but the mask slips. I believe you are the traitor Lord Grayson seeks, the one who caused Eleanor Grayson's death." The room erupted in gasps and murmurs. Lady Margaret's face paled, her eyes blazing with fury. "Me? That's absurd. I barely knew the girl. You have no proof, you pompous little man." Poirot raised a hand, his calm unshaken. "Proof, madame, is in the details. Let us walk through them, step by step, and see where they lead." He paced, slowly, his cane tapping the floor, his voice steady. "Eleanor Grayson died years ago, in a fall down the stairs of this house. An accident, they said, but Lord Grayson never believed it. His journal speaks of a debt unpaid, with your initials, Madame Hale, among others. The ledger in the study shows a payment to you dated days before Eleanor's death marked for services." "What services, madame?" Lady Margaret's lips curled, her voice icy. "I told you I met Grayson once years ago. I had no dealings. With him, no payments." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Yet the ledger disagrees, and there is more. The footprint in the fireplace, small and delicate, a woman's, I believe. You, madame, have the smallest feet among us. The scarf, painted to look like blood, was found in a locked room you were quick to dismiss as a trick. Why so quick, unless you knew it was false?" Lady Margaret stood, her hands on her hips. "This is nonsense. Footprints, ledgers. You're building a house of cards, Poirot." Dr. Wells's voice trembled. "But why would Lady Margaret hurt Eleanor? What's the motive?" Poirot turned to him, his voice calm. "Motive, monsieur, is in the past. Madame Hale, you told us you met Lord Grayson once, but the journal suggests more. You were involved in his shipping business, yes? A silent partner, perhaps, with a grudge. Eleanor, I believe, discovered something, a secret about your dealings, a lie that threatened you. To silence her, you acted." Lady Margaret laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Secret? You're spinning fairy tales. I had no reason to harm her." Miss Finch's voice was soft, her eyes wide. "Eleanor, she was scared before she died. She said someone was watching her." Poirot nodded, his gaze locked on Lady Margaret. "Exactement, mademoiselle. Eleanor wrote in her diary of a shadow in the house, of footsteps at night. You, Madame Hale, were that shadow. The payment in the ledger was for your silence, but when Eleanor learned the truth, you ensured hers." Mr. Vance's eyes narrowed, his voice low. "If she was a partner, she had motive. Grayson cheated me too. Maybe she wanted revenge." Lady Margaret's face reddened, her voice rising. "This is slander. You have no evidence, only guesses." Poirot's smile was small but certain. "Not guesses, madame. Clues. The rose. Eleanor's symbol appears in every note, every clue. The shrine in the hidden chamber was a message to you, a reminder of what you took. And the key, found among the vase shards, led us to that shrine, to Grayson's accusation. Why you? Unless he knew." Before Lady Margaret could respond, a loud thud came from the hallway, followed by heavy footsteps. The guests turned. There, faces pale as Colonel Reginald Blake stumbled into the room, his military jacket torn, his red face flushed with exhaustion. "Enough," he shouted, his voice hoarse. "I can't keep this up anymore." The room froze, every eye on Blake. Miss Finch gasped, her handkerchief falling to the floor. Dr. Wells's glasses slipped, his hands trembling. Lady Margaret's face went white, her defiance faltering. Mr. Vance's fingers stopped tapping, his gaze sharp. Poirot's eyes gleamed, his voice calm. Monsieur Blake, you return at a most opportune moment. Where have you been? Blake sank into a chair, his breath ragged. Grayson, he's alive. He found me in the greenhouse. He told me everything about Eleanor, about the plan. I helped him. The guests erupted in shock. Lady Margaret's voice was shrill. Helped him? You're part of this madness? Dr. Wells' voice was high. What plan? Where's Grayson? Poirot raised a hand, his calm silencing them. Explain, monsieur. What did Lord Grayson ask of you? Blake's eyes were haunted, his voice low. He said Eleanor was murdered. He knew who did it, but he needed proof. He asked me to disappear, to make it look like I was gone, to scare the killer into slipping up. The note, the jacket, it was all part of it. But I couldn't do it anymore. It's too much. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. Blake's confession fit his theory. Grayson was alive, manipulating events to expose the traitor. But it complicated the accusation against Lady Margaret. And who, monsieur, did Grayson say killed Eleanor? Blake's eyes flicked to Lady Margaret, then away. He didn't say. Only that the killer was here among us. He said you'd know, Poirot. Lady Margaret's face twisted with fury. This is a conspiracy. You're all against me, spinning lies to trap me. Poirot's voice was steady, his eyes locked on her. No, madame. Not lies. Truth. Your name in the ledger. Your footprint in the fireplace. Your quick dismissal of every clue. They betray you. And now, Monsieur Blake's return confirms Grayson's game. You are the shadow Eleanor feared. Lady Margaret's hands shook, her voice breaking. I didn't kill her. Yes, I knew Grayson more than I said. We were partners and he cheated me, like Vance. But Eleanor? She was nothing to me. Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice was firm. Nothing, madame? Or everything? Eleanor discovered your secret. A deal perhaps that would ruin you. You pushed her down those stairs to keep her silent. Lady Margaret sank into her chair, her face pale, her defiance crumbling. No, it wasn't like that. It was an accident. She confronted me that night about the money. We argued. On the stairs. She slipped. I didn't mean it. The room went silent, the weight of her confession settling over them. Miss Finch's tears spilled over, her voice a whisper. Eleanor, you killed her. Dr. Wells's glasses slipped off, clattering to the floor. An accident? You let everyone think it was nothing? Mr. Vance's voice was low, a growl. You let Grayson suffer, thinking it was murder. Poirot nodded, his hands clasped behind his back. An accident, madam, or a moment of panic. You did not confess, you did not help. You let the lie grow, and now Lord Grayson seeks the truth. Lady Margaret's voice was barely audible, her eyes distant. I couldn't tell anyone. It would have ruined me. Before Poirot could respond, another moan echoed, sharp and human, from the hallway. The guests froze, their eyes wide. Blake's face paled. That's him, Grayson. Poirot's smile was small but certain. The game is not over, mes amis. Lord Grayson is near, and he will show himself. The truth is unmasked, but the final act awaits. Chapter 14. The Final Revelation. The parlor of Blackwood Hall was a frozen tableau of shock and fear, the lantern's dim glow casting long, trembling shadows across the walls. Hercule Poirot stood at the center, his small, neat figure radiating a quiet certainty that held the guests in its grip. His sharp eyes, bright as polished coins, swept over their faces, reading the weight of Lady Margaret Hale's confession. That Eleanor Grayson's death years ago was an accident born of a heated argument on the stairs. Lady Margaret sat, slumped in her chair, Her green dress crumpled, her face pale, her defiance shattered. Dr. Simon Wells clutched his glasses, his nervous hands still, his eyes wide with disbelief. Miss Clara Finch wept softly, her plain gray dress blending into the gloom, her handkerchief sodden with tears. Mr. Harold Vance stood rigid, his gray beard masking his expression, but his eyes burned with a mix of relief and anger. Colonel Reginald Blake, newly returned from his stage disappearance, leaned against the wall, his torn military jacket hanging loose, his red face etched with exhaustion. Poirot's mind was a mosaic of clues, each piece now fitting into a clear picture. The cryptic letters, the key from the library, the painted scarf, the clean scarf with the wilted rose, the photograph of Eleanor, the locket with a curl of hair, the footprint in the fireplace, the secret passage, Eleanor's diary, the forged note in Blake's name, the military jacket in the greenhouse, the journal detailing Grayson's plan, the shrine to Eleanor, the ledger accusing Vance, and the small key that unlocked the hidden chamber. His theory, that Lord Grayson was alive, orchestrating a game to expose a killer, had been proven, with Lady Margaret's confession as the final stroke. The moan, heard moments ago from the hallway, had signaled Grayson's presence, and Poirot knew the time for the final revelation had come. "Mes amis," Poirot said, his voice clear and steady, cutting through the heavy silence. "The truth has been unmasked. Madame Hale has confessed to her role in Eleanor Grayson's death. An accident, she claims, but one she hid, letting a lie fester. Yet Lord Grayson, I believe, is here watching, ready to end his game. The moan we heard, it is his signal. He will show himself." Lady Margaret's head snapped up, her voice hoarse. "Grayson? Alive? After all this, you still think he's playing games?" Dr. Wells's glasses glinted, his voice shaky. "But where is he? Why hide now?" Miss Finch's tears slowed, her voice a whisper. "Edmund. He loved her so much. He'd do anything for her." Mr. Vance's growl was low, his fists clenched. "If he's here, let him face us. I'm done with his tricks." Colonel Blake's voice was rough, his eyes haunted. "He's close. I saw him in the greenhouse. He's waiting for this moment." Poirot's mustache twitched, his gaze fixed on the doorway. "Then let us call him, mes amis. Lord Grayson, your game is played. The truth is out. Show yourself." The room fell silent, every eye on the dark hallway beyond the door. The lantern's light flickered, casting eerie shapes on the walls. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a slow, deliberate footstep echoed, followed by another. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall and thin, with sharp eyes and a thin smile. The man from the portrait above the fireplace. "Lord Edmund Grayson, Miss," Finch gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Dr. Wells's glasses slipped, clattering to the floor. Lady Margaret's face went white, her hands gripping the arms of her chair. Mr. Vance's eyes narrowed, his body tensing. Colonel Blake nodded, as if expecting this. "Grayson," Lady Margaret whispered, her voice trembling. You're alive." Grayson stepped into the parlor, his gray suit immaculate despite the night's chaos, his face calm but etched with a deep sorrow. "Alive, yes," he said, his voice low and steady, "and here to see justice done for Eleanor." Poirot's smile was small but warm. "Monsieur Grayson, your game was bold, and Hercule Poirot salutes you. But now tell us, why this elaborate plan? Why bring us here to Blackwood Hall to uncover the past?" Grayson's eyes swept over the guests, lingering on Lady Margaret. "Eleanor was my heart," he said, his voice heavy. "Her death? They called it an accident, but I knew better. She was scared in her final days, writing of a shadow in her diary. I found clues, payments, secrets, lies, that pointed to you, all of you. But I needed proof, and I needed you to reveal yourselves." "Lady." Margaret's voice was shrill, her face flushed. "It was an accident, I told you, we argued, she slipped. I didn't mean to hurt her." Grayson's eyes hardened. "You argued because she discovered your secret, Margaret. You were my partner, funneling money from our shipping deals, cheating me, cheating others. Eleanor found the ledger, confronted you. You panicked and she fell. Accident or not, you let her die and you let me grieve believing a lie. Miss Finch's tears spilled over, her voice soft. Eleanor, she was so kind. Why didn't you tell someone, Lady Margaret? Lady Margaret's head bowed, her voice barely audible. I couldn't. It would have ruined me. Dr. Wells's voice was shaky, his hands fumbling for his glasses. But why us? I didn't know Eleanor. Why drag me into this? Grayson turned to him, his voice calm. You, Dr. Wells, were my doctor years ago. You signed Eleanor's death certificate, calling it an accident without a proper investigation. I wondered if you were paid to look the other way. Wells's face paled, his voice high. Paid? No. I just followed procedure. There was no evidence of foul play. Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming. And yet, monsieur, you were quick to call the scarf's paint blood stirring panic. A mistake or a habit of seeing what you wish? Wells sank into his chair, his face ashen. I didn't mean to. Grayson turned to Mr. Vance. Harold, you were my partner too. You hated me for our falling out for the money I took. I thought you might have helped Margaret out of spite. Vance's growl was fierce, his fists clenched. I hated you, yes, but I'd never hurt Eleanor. She was innocent. Grayson nodded, his voice softening. I see that now. My anger blinded me. He looked at Miss Finch, his eyes gentle. Clara, you were Eleanor's friend, her governess. You knew her fears, her love for me. I brought you here to help me, to speak for her. Miss Finch's voice broke, her tears flowing. I tried. I told what I knew. Finally, Grayson turned to Colonel Blake. Reginald, you were my friend, my confidant. You knew my pain and you agreed to help me stage this game, to disappear, to push them toward the truth. Blake's voice was rough, his eyes downcast. I did it for you, Edmund, for Eleanor. But it was hard hiding, lying. Poirot's voice was calm, his hands clasped behind his back. And I, Monsieur Grayson, was your little detective, chosen to see through the fog, to find the truth. Your clues, the rose, the scarves, the notes, the shrine, they led me to Madame Hale. But why such a game? Why not confront her directly? Grayson's smile was sad, his eyes distant. I needed her to confess, Poirot. A direct accusation she'd deny, and I had no proof, only clues. The house, the mystery, the fear. It was all to break her, to make her speak, and you, with your brilliant mind, ensured it worked. Lady Margaret's voice was a whisper, her face pale. What now, Edmund? You have your truth. What do you want? Grayson's eyes were cold, but his voice was steady. Justice, Margaret, not revenge. You'll face the law, tell your story. Eleanor deserves that. Poirot nodded, his mustache twitching. And the moans, monsieur? The shadow Clara saw? Your doing, I presume? Grayson's smile was faint. The moans were a device, hidden in the walls to keep you unsettled. The shadow was me, watching, waiting. I had to be sure. Dr. Wells's voice was weak. So, it was all a plan? No one was hurt? Grayson shook his head. No one except Eleanor long ago. The paint, the scarves, Blake's disappearance. They were to stir your fears, to reveal your truths. Miss Finch's voice was soft, her tears slowing. Eleanor. She'd be glad, Edmund. You found the truth. Poirot turned to the group, his voice steady. Mes amis, the game is over. Lord Grayson's theory was right, and Hercule Poirot has proven it. Madame Hale, you will answer for your actions. The rest of you, you are free, but carry this lesson. The past does not sleep, and the truth always finds the light. The room was silent, the weight of the night lifting like a fog. The butler, standing by the door, stepped forward, his face no longer blank, but soft with relief. Shall I prepare rooms, sir? He asked Grayson. For the night? Grayson nodded, his voice tired. Yes, Thomas. We all need rest. Poirot's smile was warm, his eyes bright. A mystery solved. A heart eased. Hercule Poirot is satisfied. As the guests dispersed, their faces a mix of relief and exhaustion, Poirot stood by the fireplace, the portrait of Lord Grayson watching. The rose in the background seemed to glow, a silent tribute to Eleanor. The house was quiet now, its secrets laid bare, and Poirot felt the thrill of a puzzle completed.